Go on, Chris Branch, welcome to H Hour.
Thanks for having me, Hugh.
Thank you for giving me your time. If you just come onto this podcast from your podcast app, please be aware that there is a shorter episode before this with Chris, which is the icebreaker. It's about 20 minutes long, 25 minutes long, I think Chris's icebreaker is. I suggest you stop what you're doing now, go back and listen to that icebreaker first. Very interesting. And then you can roll straight into this. Or if you don't want to do that, you're going, fuck it. I'm going to listen to the full podcast first. Thanks. You can't tell me what to do. Okay, well, yeah. Right. Paul Gadonis introduced us. Paul Gadonis, previous guest, twice on H Hour, once on Leading Minds, the spin-off. Now, Chris, Paul, I think, has got a little bit of a man crush on you. Okay, but I think it's justified. So Paul said to me, Paul's a good friend, obviously, we were chatting, and Paul said to me, he was told, so he had an injury, he had an accident. He was told that he would never be able to run or lift weights again, and he was told that by a surgeon. Mm-hmm. And then he met you, and Paul, as you know and I know, Paul lifts weights and runs.
He's a machine.
Paul lifts lots of weights. Paul, to me, is 100% fit and healthy. Mm-hmm. How did you manage that miracle? Because for a surgeon to say you're never going to run or lift weights again, to knowing who Paul is today, in terms of physical ability, yeah, he's a machine, mate. What's the story there? Are you able to? You might tell. I've already checked with Paul if we're okay to discuss this, by the way, and he said yeah.
No, it's fine.
Okay. So patient confidentiality out the window.
Cool. Yeah. Well, unfortunately, I hear it quite a lot from my patients that they've been told by people high up the medical tree that they can't do X. And it is baffling me because that's just not where the science is anymore. And it's really quite clear that if you do the right exercise, it really comes down to exercise, then you can resolve yourself from sometimes the worst of injuries. So I actually can't remember Paul's case specifically. So just in general.
It was a back issue.
Yeah, I remember it being back and maybe a bit of sciatica. So these things get better. The thing is...
Bulging disc, I think he said, actually.
Right.
It turned out it was a bulging disc.
Yeah.
But the surgeon said to me, never run or lift weights again.
Yeah. The way I think about it is the human body is a healing machine. You just need to find the right key for the lock. And that comes down to a good assessment, a good understanding of the person's history and lifestyle. Osteopaths, we do some hands-on treatment to accelerate recovery and just accelerate tissue change. But then really what it comes down to is how diligent is the person progressively and incrementally overloading their body. We were talking about this in the icebreaker, that you just need to do a little bit more, and hopefully a good practitioner can guide you in that so that you're going to be doing the things that don't harm the problem, but they actually make it better. And then you incrementally test yourself. And Paul's a perfect example of someone who has kept on incrementally testing himself until he's an absolute beast. And that thing that surgeon said a long time ago was just completely wrong. But I still find it baffling. I hear this a lot still, that surgeons are saying these things, and it's just, in the vast majority of cases, it's completely untrue and unfounded. And the science is very clear on this. And it's funny, we have kind of a hierarchy of medicine, and we think that surgeons are top of the tree. And they are top of the tree when it comes to doing surgery, but they're just not top of the tree when it comes to making exercise recommendations and understanding biomechanics. Because what I care more about is function. How do people function and move? And are they confident bending, twisting, lifting, moving through space? And what surgeons are very good at doing is doing surgery. And I must say here, I'm not anti-surgery. I send a handful of patients every single year for surgery. There is an absolute time and a place for it. But we have to accept that the surgeon's expertise is surgery, and other people are out there to help you rehabilitate injuries. And Paul's a good example of that.
What do you think about running? I know you're an ultra runner, mm-hmm. right? But I asked this from a personal experience. So what do you think about running as a regular form of exercise relative to the kind of injuries that can be produced, right? Now, the reason I asked this is I stopped running. I stopped regularly running sort of middle to long distance. I'd say probably 3 years ago now. I've always been a strong runner since I was young. All my powers in my legs, and then again into the military, the same thing carried over. and I got into it more regularly. It was just after COVID, and I was doing a little bit longer distances. But long story short, I was constantly in pain. My knees were sore, and I have underlying like medical issues anyway, like injuries anyway, medical issues, injuries anyway from previous, that niggles you would call them, but they're fucking things that can be overcome. I'm trying to overcome them, but I found that running was not beneficial for me. Now, the balance is I do sports that require running. Rugby, as an example. Now I switched from running to, I was doing anywhere between, sort of 3, 4, 5 miles, like a park run, up to 15, 16 miles when I stopped. I replaced it with sprints. I do sprint work anywhere from 3 or 4 times a month to 7, 8 times a month. Now it's me going out rugby pitch and I'm just training sprint,
Okay.
so varying distances in various different formats. I found that was huge. I found I didn't find any loss of benefits from being in the running side. I think because I replaced it with the sprint side. That's my experience.
Yep.
So what's your opinion on it? Like, how common is it for people to suffer with like chronic injuries because of running or not?
So there's research on this. And so rather than talk anecdotally, in this particular example, it's really good to look at big populations. And the evidence is really quite clear that on average, runners have fewer injuries than non-runners. And even if we get specific on things like knee pain, runners have lower incidence of knee pain. Runners have lower incidence of knee pain than non-runners.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
Okay. When you say non-runners, what percentage of those non-runners are physically active and not physically active?
Good question. Off the top of my head, I can't.
Because they're not doing any fitness whatsoever.
Yeah,
then
yeah.
of course it makes sense.
Yeah, off the top of my head, I don't know what the control group was. No.
Okay.
I know the study that we're talking about. If you put things in show notes and things, I can find that. But
what's the study name?
oh, sorry, I'll send it to you. Not off the top of my head.
Oh, sorry. Okay.
But, but in general, there is some really interesting study about back pain, though. So if I talk about the lumbar discs, for a long time, there was a theory in the research world that we can train our muscles and our tendons. You can make measurable changes to muscles, tendons, ligaments through weight training and plyometric training and things. But nothing seemed to be changing the discs. And then a group had a theory that maybe running does. And they looked at lumbar disc health with running, and they found that running was the only thing they'd ever found that can actually increase lumbar disc height and can improve the resilience of the outer fibers of the lumbar discs. So for your disc health, running seems to be the only thing that impacts it. And for some reason,
discs are liquid filled, right?
So the discs have an outer layer, which is basically made of the same stuff as ligaments. So it's very tough on the outside. And then on the inside, what they call the nucleus, it's kind of like a jelly. And so when people have disc bulges, it's when the jelly can push backwards into the outer fibers. And then in some severe cases, that jelly can burst out, and that's quite toxic then and becomes very inflamed. And like I say, the only thing that's in terms of exercise that seems to positively benefit the discs is running. And they seem to respond really well to that regular stimulus of impact. And they don't respond very well to heavy lifting for just a few reps. It has to be thousands of reps at a lower impact. So disc health has been shown to be positively affected by running. There are lots of these measurable benefits, but there is a caveat to what I'm saying. You have to do it right. So on average, runners tend to have better joint health than non-runners. And I'll try and find that study for you. But there are caveats that if you're running incorrectly, and the biggest thing that most people do is training load. So they're either running too much or doing too much intensity. So running too fast when they're running. That can lead to injury. There are technique issues that people might have that can lead to injury. So when I'm assessing a runner, I'll ask them quite specifically about their training load, like literally not just how far they're running, but what's their heart rate when they're running? How much speed work are they doing? How much slow running are they doing? What's their long run day? Have they ever even thought about this stuff, or do they just go out and run, which is where most people just start this journey? I'll then film them. I've got a special app on an iPad where I can film them running outside, slow it down into slow motion, just see where their foot's landing on the floor and things like that. And then the other thing that many runners don't do is strength training. I mean, it sounds like you were doing that, but strength training is very helpful for runners as well and can help prevent injury. So
It's general strength training.
yeah, it doesn't have to. I mean, you can do some really quite specific exercises that can help you as a runner, but I just think it's good to just generally be strong legs, strong calves, strong core, upper body. All of that matters as a runner. So in general, running's good for you, but you need to be doing it correctly, having the right training load, and doing some of the accessory strength work as well, and trying to focus a little bit on running technique.
One of the things I was looking at when I was having real issues with my knees, well, I have real issues with my knees now, but previously when it was like super painful, when I was still running a lot, was the choice of whether to wear traditional heeled trainers for running or looking at the barefoot style.
Yep.
And that's when I first came across that South American tribe. South
Tamaru,
American group called the Tarahumara.
Tamara.
Tamara, is that what you pronounce it?
Yeah, I think
Tarahumara?
so.
Who, they're barefoot, long distance barefoot, or just like real thin sole stuff.
Absolutely.
And I ended up buying a pair of, very early on, they were New Balance. This is years ago. We're talking 15 years ago, maybe. New Balance,
Minimus.
super thin sole, which are designed to make you run on the balls of your toes, balls of your feet. First one I ever did know, it was excruciatingly painful for my calves.
Yeah.
My calves were not used to it. I was used to heel running. And one of the problems I was having was the impact was really impacting my, no pun intended, my knees. I was getting a lot of pain after the fact. But however, that reduced it when I started running that stuff. What do you think about that?
So
Barefoot style or heeled?
So I probably bought the same pair of New Balance as you at the same time. I also bought a pair of those Vibram Five Fingers. I did what many people did 15 years ago, which was read Born to Run, learn about the Tarahumara tribe, buy some Vibram Five Fingers, go running, get Achilles tendonitis. And
I wasn't the 5-finger knob. No,
I was. So it made perfect sense to me. And the thing is, it made perfect sense to a lot of people as well. And there was this huge movement of going into that barefoot running. Now, our opinions have actually changed on that. And I am now someone who doesn't run in those, and I definitely don't advocate the average person run in minimal shoes. I'm not wearing this today. 95% of my time when I'm not running, I spend in Vivo barefoot shoes. So I walk in minimal barefoot shoes. I go to the gym in minimal barefoot shoes. I'm working. I wear them casually. 95% of my time, I do actually wear barefoot shoes. And what I've gained from that is my feet are definitely stronger. I can literally feel the pads, the musculature underneath my foot is thicker, and I can feel my toes now gripping the floor in certain movements. I know I've got more control, more mobility as well, and more strength in the soles of my feet. That's good. But we have to accept that we did not grow up barefoot. So most people are getting into this stuff as adults where our feet have already made certain adaptations. And when I go back to that time when I was running in those Vibram Five Fingers, I built myself up to running 10 miles in them. And after about 3 miles, all I could think about was my feet and how much they hurt. I could run 10 miles in them and not be injured, but it was not pleasant. So now where I've landed and where many people who have gone this journey have landed is we've realized that the number one priority with our shoes is for the ability for our forefoot to splay. So what I prioritize now over anything is a wide toe box. And now there are running brands that do that. I run in a brand called Altra, ALTRA, and they have cushion, but a wide toe box. So they look like a fairly traditional running shoe from the side, but when you take a top-down view, the forefoot is wide as
Are they a Japanese company? I'm sure I got a pair of them.
I don't think they're Japanese.
Anyway, Ultra.
Yeah, Ultra.
Okay.
Yeah. There are a few brands, now that this is becoming more well known, that having a mobile forefoot and the ability for your toes to splay, there are new brands jumping on the bandwagon as well. So when I got into this, Ultra are really the only brands that had a combination of cushioning and a wide toe box. And that's what I favor now. That's what I think is probably the best of both worlds, having the ability for your forefoot to splay, but having a bit of cushioning, that's good. You mentioned forefoot striking. There's research on that as well. And that doesn't seem to be the most relevant thing. So if it's true that if you run actually barefoot, the example I give is, say you're standing barefoot at a barbecue and a kid kicks a football and you've never done any running in your life, but you have to go and chase the football before it goes in the road. You're barefoot and you will kind of hot foot with short steps on the balls of your foot, because if you're totally barefoot, it actually hurts to land on your heel too hard. And modern shoes allow you to land on your heel when you're running, which you just wouldn't do if you were completely barefoot. The initial assumption was that that's bad, that landing on your heel is bad because we wouldn't do it if we were completely barefoot. Now what the research seems to be showing is the most relevant thing is if you are taking a side view of your body, and this is what I do with my runners in the clinic, is I film them and go into slow motion, take a side view, and really what I care about is where is their foot landing relative to their center of mass. So their center of mass is just behind their belly button. Draw a plumb line, gravity line straight down to the floor from behind their belly button. And what's the angle that their foot is landing out in front of them? And if their foot is way out in front of them, that's a problem because of Newton's law of motion, action equals reaction. So if you're a mass that has forward momentum and you throw your foot out in front of you, you have an equal and opposite force of ground reaction coming back up into your heel, your knee, your hip, your back. And that can create quite a jarring effect. If, however, the person is kind of cycling their legs and landing their foot relatively, not completely, but relatively underneath their body, it actually doesn't matter if they're landing on their heel or their midfoot or their forefoot. And there's going to be lots of just genetic variance in that, like what's your ankle structure like, what's your tibia length versus your femur length, what's your hip shape and pelvis shape like. There are going to be lots of things that influence whether it's a heel strike or a midfoot strike or a forefoot strike. But the most relevant thing is how close to that plumb line is your contact point. And if you're landing on your heel because you can in a modern shoe, that's not the end of the world. It's how far your foot out is in front of you that's probably more relevant.
Yeah. No, you know what? You're making me think there about a technique, a military running technique, I would call it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I've not thought about this before, but there is a common, what was common when I was in military fitness format that particularly airborne units would do and parachute regiment would do, and we would call it a 2-miler, or sometimes we do a 3-miler. And that is basically you go, let's look at the 2-miler, which is more common. You would go 2 miles, which is relatively short for us.
Mm-hmm.
We would go 2 miles as fast as we can. You kind weight,
Mm-hmm.
okay, anything from 35 pounds up to about 50 pounds on your back.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes you'd be carrying a weapon, sometimes you'd be carrying belt kits, additional, but which just changes the distribution of the weight. But we found that, well, I say we found, when I came through into the unit, the way you would do that, they found that the best way to do that, to be able to go as fast as you can over that distance without fatiguing yourself, so that you're too tired, is the effect at the end. Because the idea is you get into a battle real quick. You've got to cover 2 miles real quick, as fast as you can, but you've got to get there and you've got to be not completely wiped out, but not completely wiped out. And we would do something called the airborne shuffle. So if you look at it, it's like a lazy run. I would describe it as you're not running like you normally would. And you do that in a 2-miler, you do that in a 3-miler. And when we do longer marches, which could be, 8 miles, 9 miles, 10 miles, 20 or 30 miles, 50 miles sometimes, then in those periods, you're mostly just marching. But if you're going on the flat or downhill, you're doing the airborne shuffle. Mm-hmm. That's what you do. Only when you're going uphill, you should be walking. Mm-hmm. And the rest is like you do the airborne shuffle. Again, that's sort of lazy running. But what I'm realizing now when you're talking is I think the reason that got developed is because it's all about impact. It's all about impact. You don't lift your knees very high. You don't lift your feet very high. You're moving your legs just enough so your both feet are off the ground. So you're running. Mm-hmm. You pick up the pace over the walking, but you're not full on running. Mm-hmm. So you're not creating high impact on your knees and your ankles, on your muscles, with all that weight on.
Yeah.
Now maybe that sort of translates into the same kind of thingy, or you just minimize an impact.
So
like,
there's something
except without
called
weight.
the Ultra Shuffle. Exactly the same
No,
thing.
no.
It's,
no. It's the Airmore Shuffle. Never mind this Ultra nonsense. Go on, the Ultra Shuffle. Go on.
It's
Okay,
exactly the same thing. We've just
Same
called it the Ultra Shuffle.
Is it?
Yeah.
The Ultra Shuffle.
I think I'm right in saying this. The Ultra Shuffle became famous by this Australian farmer that won one of the toughest ultra marathons in Australia, wearing his gummies, like his welly boots, and he just rocked up.
No.
Yeah. He was just a farmer, walked up in basically welly boots, and no technical gear whatsoever, and he just was wearing his farming clothes, and he just did this shuffle, and because he was out all day just farming, he had this incredible aerobic base. He'd built this technique to travel across the farm efficiently, and he just annihilated everybody. And Australia.
That's crazy. Okay, Cliff Young. I've got
That's him, Cliff Young.
Cliff Young, an Australian potato farmer from. Hang on, how old do you think he was?
I think he was mid-40s when he did it. Was he?
No. Okay, Cliff Young, an Australian potato farmer from Beach Forest, Victoria, won the Sydney to Melbourne ultramarathon in 1983 at the age of 61, wearing rubber boots and overalls. His unique running style resembling a shuffle and unconventional attire caught everyone's attention. Young's victory was unexpected as he was not a professional runner and had never owned a pair of running shoes. He attributed his success to his childhood experience rounding up sheep on a large farm where he often ran long distances in all weather conditions. I'm just trying to freaking picture this lunatic. My God, I've never heard of this guy.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Do you know what? When I said
See
he was...
this? I want to put this up the camera. There's the camera. That is him. You see that?
That's him.
That
Yeah.
is them.
When I said I guessed 45 years old, in my head I was like, I remember him being old, as in old to win a race. But no, 61, and he just, I mean, I treat lots of farmers, and they are tough people. They just get on with things. They don't let pain get in their way, and he was obviously one of those people. But that he developed that people started copying him with the Ultra Shuffle, and it is exactly the technique you mentioned.
Wearing wellies.
Not quite with the wellies, but it was the same technique as the Airborne Shuffle. So someone hijacked it from someone.
Were you not concerned? Sorry, were you when you got into your ultra running? Were you not concerned yourself about the impact on the body and injuries and stuff like that?
I did a 180 opinion change on this. Before I got into running, I did think it was pretty stupid to be running that far. And then, as we said in the icebreaker, I accidentally started to run a really long way. It wasn't initially by design. I just, when I gave up alcohol, I wasn't hungover every weekend, so I started running, and then gradually each run just got a little bit further, and then before I knew it, I could run quite a long way, and I wanted to start to have adventures. And prior to going on that journey, it didn't make sense to me that running 50 miles or 100 miles was a good idea. I thought, why on earth are you looking for short-term accolades? I thought it was a bit of an ego thing. Maybe it is an ego thing, but I felt like these people were doing it to say they'd done it while sacrificing their later life health. And then I became one of those people, and I realized two things. Firstly, it's all down to training. Anything, running a really long way, but anything you want to do in life is down to training. The problems with your body occur when you do something that's way outside your comfort zone. You can, however, if you gradually and incrementally train your comfort zone, you can do ridiculous things with your body. But you just have to take the time and the diligence and be consistent. There's no fast track. You just have to be very consistent over a long period of time. And ultra running is one of those things. If you do the training, you can be fine. The second thing I learned, though, was very counterintuitively, ultra running seems kinder to the body than faster running, shorter, faster running. When we go back to that book, Born to Run, the thing that made me want to run barefoot, one of the things they talk about in that book, humans are born to run. There are parts of our anatomy that only make sense when we're running, and if we're just walking, they just don't really make sense. So the things that make sense only when we're running are a ligament in the back of your neck called the nuchal ligament. It's a thin sheet of ligament that goes straight down the back of the neck. And really, when we're walking and moving and just moving around space at slow speed, it just doesn't make sense. There's no reason for it to be there. As soon as we start to run faster and have more impact and head wobble, that's where it makes sense. It helps stabilize our head with the impact of running. When you look at the angle of...
Sorry, so it reduces impact to the brain.
Sorry, not to the brain, but just it reduces the head wobble.
Right.
When we've got enough impact going up into our body from running, the nuchal ligament stabilizes our head. And then also things like when you look at the angle of our pelvis to our hip and the glute max, we only get maximum usage of that muscle when we're running. When we're walking, the angle doesn't quite make sense. So there are certain things that are optimized in our anatomy for running. So we kind of know that humans can run, should run. But if you look at the oldest versions of running, and there are still some hunter-gatherer tribes today, you look at how they run, and it is basically ultra running. The form of running that they use is they use it in persistence hunting. They don't just go out for a jog to stay healthy. That's a complete waste of calories. If you have to work every day to get your food from hunting or gathering, you don't waste calories just for the sake of it. You don't do anything like that. But they do run to hunt, and they do it with persistence hunting, which is where they use a combination of tracking to find an animal, scare it, track it, find it again, scare it, chase it. And because humans can sweat in the middle of the day, and this is often done in Africa where it's very hot, humans can sweat, the animals they're chasing can't sweat. And over the period of a whole day, they just completely fatigue the animal to the point where it's actually really easy to kill the animal that is bigger and stronger.
I have never heard of that technique. Wow.
Oh,
okay. Okay. Makes total sense. But okay.
I was speaking
persistence hunting.
Yeah, it's called persistence hunting. Right. I'm kind of glad you validated that story, because I was hoping it wasn't boring. You heard it 1,000 times. It's fascinating. So there's a really cool YouTube video where they follow one of these African tribes who still use it, and they get to the point where, I forget the animal, but it's a big animal that they've just chased all day. And at the end of the day, it's a really easy kill. And what I find really fascinating about the video as well is just how spiritual it is, and how much they care for this animal, and how the eventual kill is done through love and ceremony. And they've had this bond with this animal all day. They've been tracking it and just feeling the air, hearing their surroundings, seeing the ground that this animal's been on. Them. They've built this relationship over the day, and it's an incredible technique. But the way they run is in short bursts, sometimes fast, often as slow as possible and as efficient as possible, because they're hunting. They need food. They don't want to waste their calories. And the most important thing about this, in terms of the context of modern day running, is what they're not doing is a steady 7-minute mile to try and get a 3-hour marathon or something. They're using running as transportation for the day to cover big distance, to try and be as efficient as possible. But it's actually quite interval based. They're stopping, they're tracking, they're looking, they're walking, and then they're running when they need to. And that's actually really quite similar to a very big ultra marathon. And when you're doing 100 miles, you're not running. Or the average person, the very, very elite people could potentially run for a whole 100 miles. But the average person doing 100 miles is walking a bit, eating a bit, seeing some nice scenery and taking a photo, and then running. If we're going steep uphill, we'll be walking. If we're going downhill, we'll kind of use that to run a bit faster and make up some distance quickly. But it's much more interval based, matching your speed and intensity to your surroundings. And I feel like ultra running is much more like how we've evolved to run, which is slow, steady, fast when you can, slow when you need to, mixing it up through the day, trying to be as efficient as possible over a long distance. And where this all started, is that I actually think that's kinder to the body. And I've been that person who's tried to absolutely run my fastest 5K time. I got totally addicted to the park run, getting my times down. And I love that. I'm not knocking it at all. I love the fast road racing. I love the fast intensity of a hard 5K, a hard 10K. I'm not knocking it whatsoever. But in terms of the effect on your body, I bizarrely think ultra running's better for it.
Really?
Yeah.
I have, before I stopped running, I would have loved to have done it. Like, it was one of the things I think I really want to do would be an ultra marathon. And it first came onto my radar as like a serious. I thought that is fucking amazing and an appealing type of race. When I read, I need to just sort of Google the name there. I couldn't remember her name. When I read about, when I heard about Courtney Dauwalter, yeah.
Oh,
And
yeah.
for people who aren't aware, Courtney Dauwalter, I think it was 2021 or something like that. She won the Moab 240. Now, the Moab 240 is an ultra marathon. I think it's in America, and it's a 240-mile ultra marathon. And I heard about it. She was on the Joe Rogan Experience, being interviewed by him as she'd won it, and she won it in. So it took her 57 hours and 52 minutes, right, which is fucking quick. But she was 10 hours ahead of second place. 10 hours ahead of second place. Like, unbelievable. Unbelievable. I think it was 10 hours. She thought it was more than that. I thought it was like 18. No, she was 10 hours ahead of second place, wasn't it? Yeah. Now, and when she was talking through that experience, it really appealed to me. In the mindset you have to get into, I think it almost has to be like a meditative mindset at the top end of that. You were saying the elite. You know, she was talking there. She was talking on there about hallucinating, the just complete fatigue, mental fatigue, the tiredness, and of going through that. I think she fell over in the night. She cut her head open. She had blood pouring down her face. And for something like the last 8 miles or 16 miles, she could barely see.
Yeah, she had a particular type of blindness.
Maybe you know more about this story than I do. Have you read much about it?
So I think the blindness actually came in a different race, something called the bunny or something to do with a rabbit. But that 240 was just insane. What I've come to learn is she's an example of someone who just has an incredible ability to suffer and to deal with suffering. And that ability is a spectrum. And I'm aware of it because I know I'm not anywhere near as good at it. That I let the voices start to win. But that's actually why I like to do ultra marathons, because there is a point where you start to test yourself, and then it becomes a question of, are you going to let the voices win? Or are you not going to let the voices win? Are you going to push through? And that happens to us all, no matter what your ability. And she's just an example of someone who does not let the voices win.
Though. You can train.
It's completely trainable.
You can become comfortable with a level of pain.
Yeah.
And once you become comfortable with that level of pain, then guess what? There's a level of pain above that. Yeah. And you can work to become more comfortable with that. And the example I always regularly use with it, is I use the sauna as that. I use a sauna as a 20 minutes that I'm going to do fucking nothing. I use a sauna as 20 minutes I'm going to do nothing but be in my own mind. But every time I get in the sauna, it's difficult. And last year, and sorry for people who heard me speak about this at length, but there's actually a bit of a change this year on the subject of becoming comfortable with pain. Is that last year? So my ideal is I go into sauna, I do 20 minutes, right? Last year I would go into sauna maybe once or twice a week. Last year I maybe managed 20 minutes 3 or 4 times last year in the entire year, right? Which is pretty embarrassing. And the reason is I would start feeling uncomfortable at the 5 or 6 minute point. The voices in my head start shortly after, and I'd be getting out at 10 or 15 minute point. I'd be making excuses to get out. Mm-hmm. Yeah, you got stuff to do, and you get out. This year, the first time I got into the sauna was on the 1st of January. And I got in and I said to myself, you're going to do 20 minutes. 1st of January, you're going to do 20 minutes. That's it. There's no decision. There's no option. You're not getting out. You're doing 20 minutes. And I got in and it got uncomfortable pretty quick. But for some reason, my mindset was different. I think it was just like, 1st of January, you can do this. New year, blah, 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 you got it. I did 20 minutes on the 1st of January. I've been going to the sauna 2, 3, 4 times a week since the 1st of January up to now. And at the point of recording on the 21st of February, I have not failed to hit 20 minutes. Not once have I failed to hit 20 minutes. I'm in the same body I was in last year. I'm in physically the same body. There's no drastic changes. My life hasn't changed drastically to become more positive, which has given me more mental strength. The sole difference is that I went in with the mindset the 1st of Jan. I did the 20 minutes, and to me it's like, well, there's no excuses, no dropping below. That is the standard now. Mm-hmm. You go to 20 minutes. Most of it's been easy. Most of the time it's been easy. A couple of times it's been probably twice it's been really uncomfortable. And those times it's been really uncomfortable, I know it's because I've been dealing with lots of stress in the build up to that moment, or I haven't done a lot of exercise. I've done less exercise than I would do in the week building up to it. And what that results in for me is I deal with discomfort a lot worse.
It's amazing how quickly we lose the ability, isn't it?
Yeah, and I use the sauna. It is my indicator of where my mind is. If I go into sauna and I'm finding it difficult, really difficult, really quick, and I'm arguing myself to get out or not. Again, that's happened twice this year. I straight away think, why is that? Why is that? It's not the sauna doing that to me. That's my mindset. And those 2 times it's happened, it's been because, well, mainly for 2 reasons. 3 reasons. My routine has gotten away from me the week before, maybe because work's crazy, maybe because just different things, which has impacted my going to the gym, keeping physically fit, right? Which means I've done less of it. Okay. And normally those 2 times it's tied in at the same time as work being a lot of pressure coming from work, which has impacted the routine. I've got less time to do it and I'm doing less, right? Which means then I handle pressure a lot worse, discomfort a lot worse. And I see it in the sauna, like, every single time, 20 minutes easy, well, almost easy. The 2 times it's not is because I've got all this stuff going on in my life. And I like to make this point about it, right? Because I feel like I'm lucky in that I can see that. I have the opportunity now to see when these things, I can actually see tangible impacts of stress and lack of routine and lack of physical exercise on me. It's tangible. I can measure it literally by how many minutes it takes for me to get really uncomfortable in the sauna, right?
Yeah.
Most people don't have that opportunity. Most people don't. So they don't realize how impactful it is not keeping physically active. We're going back onto the icebreaker, which is, I think, is so important to make time if you can. If you have a body and your body is physically capable, you're not suffering from an illness or severe injury prevents it, you need to make time for yourself, and sorry to go on to that, it's comes back to that, becoming comfortable with pain. You can go a level up. You can train it up, right? You can train it up. So on that,
yes,
ultra running. So what kind of distances did you start off with?
My first ultra, I was chatting to a friend. I'd been running consistently for a while, and then we had an idea. We want to have an adventure, and did a little bit of research. And I stumbled across a race called Ultra Trail Snowdonia. So it was in quote only 50k, which is generally 50 kilometers, which is generally the entry level 50k. But it was in Snowdonia, and we summited 4 mountains in a day.
God.
So it was an adventure. It was really hard, and that was my first one. But
how long did it take you?
So that took me 10 hours. If I ran a 50k around my town, it would take me 5 hours or less, and it was double the time in that terrain. It's such savage terrain in the Welsh mountains, but stunningly beautiful. And what I say about that race is it just made my soul sing. I realized this is what I've needed in my life this whole time.
Really? But can you be more specific on that? What was it about it?
A combination of...
Did you run with him the whole way round?
Unfortunately, he got injured so I ran it on my own. The thing that makes my soul sing is a combination of doing something incredibly hard, because there's a point in that race in particular, my first race, I got everything wrong in terms of my nutrition strategy, my pacing strategy. I thought I did actually train really well in the run up to it, but in the race, I just made rookie mistakes.
What did you do?
I went out too fast, and I didn't eat enough consistently. And these are big lessons I've learned now, and I've dialed those things in now. I know how to pace myself. I know how to fuel myself. But I got it all wrong. And then after about 7 hours, that race became very hard. So I had another 3 hours of misery.
Just fatigue, was it? Fatigue mainly?
My quads had completely blown because I'd been going downhill too fast. And complete fatigue and pain. And the thing is, there's a difference between getting your race management right and it's still being hard and painful, but getting your race management wrong and that pain is just miserable. It's so miserable. And then there's the added misery of, this is all self-inflicted. You should have gone out slower. You should have been better with your fueling. So all of that was very hard, but you're doing it in the most stunning scenery. So there's this combination of you testing yourself, pushing yourself to your physical and mental limits on that day, being surrounded by pure natural beauty. And the combination of those two things is what made my soul sing. And I got the bug then. And then gradually I just wanted to do more and more races, bigger things, more difficult things. And my longest race now has been 100 miles. But that was a weird one. That was on a track. So what I say about ultra running is I love the physical fitness that allows you to cover big distance in a day out in nature. And I also love what it teaches you about the nature of your mind. The reason I chose to run 100 miles on a track was that was pure mind. You strip everything away. You take the beauty away. You take the nature away. There's nothing to do but run around that orange track, and the only thing you're left with then is the voices in your head, and that's why I chose it, because it was a tough mental challenge.
Jesus, that's great. Yeah, I've done both mistakes in the past. So the preparation, I say, wasn't a mistake. It just wasn't prepared, but it was a lot shorter. So it was a 24-mile run-in race in the Falkland Islands. When I was out there with the military in 2002, and this is like an annual race they have, and we entered a bunch of teams, and my unit entered a bunch of teams, and we were generally quite fit anyway. The terrain was a mix of undulating, very steep but short hills, to relative, not flat, but meandering, easy up, easy down kind of thing, but over 24 miles, and been on the piss the day before. It was a team of three of us. You had to go in team of three, and it was like we carried one bag between you, a safety bag, which wasn't that heavy. I think it was like 20 or 30 pounds that we shared between us. But I ended up wearing a pair of boots that, it wasn't training, it was military kit, wearing a pair of boots that I hadn't done anything further than 5 miles or 6 miles in them. They were relatively new. Turns out it was slightly too small for me, and at the 8 mile point, both my big toenails started coming off, and they came off. And shortly after that, I started cramping, and both quads and both hamstrings cramped. I had that for about 15, 12, 13, 14, 15 miles. The most of the race I was cramped, and I couldn't bend my legs. And it was running. We were shuffling. We were meant to be an airborne shuffle, the whole thing. We ended up winning it. We were 45 minutes ahead of the second place, and but the pain was unbelievable. I couldn't walk for 3 days after, because my quads were so strained from being they were cramped for miles and miles and miles and miles. But there's no way they're going to let the team down. Miles and miles and miles and miles. That was the first one I got wrong, and the second one I got wrong was a 50 mile. It was a 50 miler with kit. Everyone had kit. It was. I had 50 pounds. I think the guys just had to have 35 pounds at the time. I was just routinely carrying more weight because I could, because why not? And we did 50 miles, and I had responsibility for a bunch of the guys on that. There was a lot of us doing it, but I made the fatal mistake, and it's really basic. For some reason, I basically didn't consistently and frequently take on water.
Mm-hmm.
And which is a really basic thing in the military, and I think I almost entirely overlooked it, and that meant that when we finished that 50 miler, I basically crumbled. The guys didn't see it. I got myself home. I lived near the camp. When I got in, I was literally onto my knees onto the floor. I needed food and water. I was literally crumbling. Crumbling. If I didn't have it quick, I think it would have been serious. And the only reason I got through the whole thing was because I was focused on looking after the guys. I completely neglected myself. Real Billy basic mistake. But yeah, I've gotten both wrong. I don't think I would have got it wrong if I was solely focused on myself, and I think I overestimated my ability as well. But I just got distracted for different reasons. But the idea of, like, when you said you went through the 50K in Snowdonia, the idea of going through that solo, I would prefer than going through it with someone else.
Mm-hmm.
I think, because I think for me, I would be able to get myself into a stronger position mentally than if I was with someone else. That
Yeah.
makes sense?
My mistake that year was it was my first one, and I was like a kid in a candy shop when I saw those mountains, because I didn't have the time to do any recce's there. So I was just, these mountains, they're amazing. And the thing about a good training block is you become very fit during your training block, but you're also fatigued most of the time. You're deliberately running on tired legs. You should feel this underlying sense of fatigue. What I say about my training blocks is, for about 20 weeks, I'm tired and hungry. And that's part of the plan. I'm going to be running on tired legs. You should factor
Part
in.
of the plan does not increase the chance of injury beforehand, though.
So you factor in deload weeks. So there is a structure and a system to it. But so I typically use, depending where I'm at in the plan, I use a 2 or 3 week build phase. And by the end of week 3, you're knackered. And then you factor in a deload week. And then by the Sunday of the deload week, so literally the last Saturday, Sunday of that deload week, you're thinking, oh, okay, I'm ready to train again. I'm raring to go. And then you've got 3 more weeks of fatigue, and then you deload again. But then at the very end of that, you have a taper, which is about 2 weeks of much lower volume. And by the end of the 2 weeks, you're raring to go. You're super fit and you're rested. And then for me, it was my first time in the Welsh mountains. They were stunningly beautiful. And I had this feeling of like, yeah, I've got this. This is race day. This is what it's all about. So we climbed four mountains that day. And on mountain 1, I was like, yeah, it's supposed to be hard. I'm supposed to be, I know what my heart rate should be. The fact that it's higher than that right now, this is race day. I'm going to push it. and then it turns out 7 hours later, no. You should have stuck to the heart rate that you knew you should have been sticking to, because your quads are blown and you're absolutely knackered and you're sidestepping down hills. And I actually did the same race the following year, the same 50K. I just wanted to do it well before I increased distance. And in year 1, the first time I did it, I was literally sidestepping down the final 2 mountains. My quads were so blown, I couldn't even walk down forwards. I had to sidestep. The second year, I got my race management all really good. And going down the final mountain, I was like, okay, I can let myself go here. I was running 5.5 minute miles down this mountain because it was like a lovely runnable terrain and quite a steep downhill. I was running 5.5 minute miles. I was like, what a difference a year makes. And partly through training, but just through knowledge, just gaining knowledge in a year of making big mistakes, doing other ultra marathons, testing out my nutrition, testing out my pacing, really understanding heart rate. And that final mountain on the way down, I got goosebumps running down at 5.5 minute miles going, what a difference a year makes. I was such a rookie and made all these silly errors. And now I'm starting to learn and implementing it in a good race. And it was cool. It was good fun.
Well, do you know much about zone 2 running?
I'm a massive advocate of zone 2 running.
Okay, right.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
the reason I ask is, I got a friend called Jack Russell, and I know some of the people that listen to this podcast know Jack. He's a really cool dude. We served in the military together. Anyway, a few years back when he started zone 2 running, I think he was doing, as he described it, and he was a massive advocate of it. I think he still is. We've just not spoken about it recently. But yeah, so explain it to me, because it seemed really counterintuitive to me as to a type of running that can improve your performance. When zone 2 running, and of my understanding, zone 2 is like basically easy running. You're not pushing yourself.
Yeah, correct.
Okay, can you explain it? Can
Absolutely.
You elaborate? Okay, go on.
So I'll start right at the beginning of the journey in terms of we've got what we're talking about here is how are your muscles getting energy? And the way our muscles get energy is just through chemical reactions. And there are 2 different chemical reactions we can use for that. There's aerobic metabolism, which is what we use when we're moving more slowly. And the chemical reaction in aerobic metabolism uses oxygen. So we can breathe our way into that chemical reaction. But when we need energy more quickly, because we're moving faster, that's where we would use our anaerobic system. That chemical reaction happens much faster. It doesn't require oxygen, but it does have the byproduct of creating lactic acid. So we can't do it forever, because eventually that lactic builds up, and that's the thing that eventually slows us down and stops us from working. The way I think about it is aerobic, we call it an aerobic base. Aerobic system, our aerobic base is the engine of a car. And when we need to move faster, the anaerobic system is the turbo of the car. So the reason it's counterintuitive is
I like that. I like that. It's a good analogy. Yeah.
so the counterintuitive thing about running slow is that it doesn't make sense that running slow will make you faster. But actually, if you had two cars, one with a 1 litre engine and a turbo, and one with a 3 litre engine and a turbo, the 3 litre engine and a turbo is going to go much faster. So if we take something like a 5K race, which if you go all out in a 5K, it's a miserable experience. It's a hard 20, 25 minutes, whatever you're going to do. It's a very disgusting race. You're going to want to throw up on the end. It feels very anaerobic. You're completely gassed for that 20 minutes. But actually, when you look at the metabolism behind it, 80% of the energy in your muscles is still coming from the aerobic system. So if you specifically train your aerobic system, the slow system with zone 2 running, and you build your base and you become someone who, for example, when I got into zone 2 running, I was running 10.5-minute miles at my zone 2 pace. And gradually I've got that down to 8-minute miles at my zone 2 pace.
And you're measuring your zone 2 at your heart rate, right?
Okay, yeah. So at the same heart rate, I used to be running 10.5-minute miles. And it's by definition, it's an easy heart rate. That was a 10.5-minute mile for me. Now that's an 8-minute mile for me. So if we transport me into that 5K race.
What's the heart rate?
So that's kind of dependent on age and fitness. So if I'm nearly 40, so I'm running about 145 heart rate in my zone 2 runs. And so there are things like it's your age, how fit you are, how stressed you are you on any medications, how well slept you are.
But for you, it's 145.
Yeah, 145 is what I aim at. And that is now an 8-minute mile, whereas it used to be a 10-minute mile, so a 10.5. So if I'm running that hard 5K, which is 80% aerobic, and I used to turn the engines on after 10.5-minute miles when I'm going faster than 10.5, but now I'm turning the turn the engines on, turn the turbos on, and now I'm turning the turbos on when I'm going faster than an 8-minute mile. I'm just faster. So all of this slow running has actually made me faster. It's also it's not just good for performance, but it's also really good for injury prevention. So one of the things that many people do when they're complaining about running injuries is they're doing way too much running in zone 3 and zone 4. And it's a very common story.
But don't train zone 4.
No, they've been doing too much running in zone 3 and zone 4.
Okay.
So if the average...
They're the high zones.
Higher zone. It goes up to... there are different systems, but most people use the 5-zone system. So the top of this game is zone 5. Zone 3 is what I call kind of fun fast, which is where most people do most of their running. If you ran, once you're a little bit conditioned, you could run 5 miles and get to the end of that 5 miles going, yeah, do you know what? That was a good workout. I could have done more, but I was really out of breath. I'm hot and sweaty. That felt like a great workout. I'm not completely rinsed, but that was kind of hard and a great, in quote, great workout. Unfortunately, that's what we call the gray zone. It's not really fast enough and hard enough to be good anaerobic conditioning. It's too fast to be good aerobic base zone 2 conditioning. But unfortunately, while it's not good at aerobic conditioning, it's not really good at anaerobic conditioning either. It is the sort of zone that is still quite physiologically taxing and can increase risk of injury if you do it too much. So if someone hasn't learned this stuff and hasn't really ever thought about it, and by the way, this was me a few years ago. I was just running, not really thinking about it. I was doing hard 5-milers a few times a week, and I'd get to the end of each workout going, yeah, that was a good workout. And nothing was ever thought about. It was just, I'm going running, and whatever pace I can run 5 miles in is what I'll do. And that's quite a common story. But gradually what that does over time is it becomes really physiologically fatiguing and can increase risk of injury. So if someone is struggling with persistent injuries, this would really be the first thing they have to think about is what's their training load like? Not just how far are they running, but how intensely are they running measured by their heart rate? And they want to mix up their week. So the majority, there's a theory that people should be roughly using an 80-20 rule where 80% of their volume should be this slow zone 2 stuff and 20% should be faster. There is a caveat to this that if you're brand new to fitness, it's not gonna be very easy to stay in zone 2 in a run. So if you're completely brand new to fitness and not particularly fit, it's okay at first to be going over your zone 2 a bit, but just understand that as you get fitter, you then need to be throwing in some zone 2 runs and eventually landing at about the 80-20 rule.
Okay, question then.
Yeah.
Right. I am, for example, I am someone who was listening to the Icebreaker with Chris Branch and Hugh Keir, and I was thinking, man, yeah, I'm going to take on board what they've just been talking about. I want to feel a bit better of myself. I'm going to start doing some exercise, and I'm going to start running. And I'm going to start running because my motivation is I want to lose some weight.
Mhm.
Right. What would your recommendation be for someone like that? Someone who's gone from nothing to something. So recommendations, I mean, what duration should they be looking for, and what heart rate should they be looking for? Percentage of heart rate should they be looking for? I know it's a very general question, right?
No, it's good. I mean, I deal with these people in my clinic all the
Okay.
time. So generally, at first, I'm a big advocate of walk running. And there are different ways to go about this. His name's just fallen out of my head. Jeff Galloway, that's it. So to walk run, you can do the Couch to 5K app. But I kind of prefer a guy called Jeff Galloway, and he's become quite famous in the concept of walk running, and he's got all these formulas around how to structure how much time you should be walking, how much time you should be running, and it's become a verb now. You go out for a Jeff, and you can go Jeffing, and if anyone's interested, Jeff Galloway is the chap, and it's worth following. An easier version could be to use the Couch to 5K app because it can talk to you. It's just a podcast.
Well, the thing is on this, right?
Yeah.
Is that the thing is here.
Uh-huh.
I get what you're saying, but I think people can have paralysis by analysis, and they get so afraid of doing it the wrong way, they don't do anything at all,
Mhm.
right? So, yeah, I think fair to say.
That's where I completely agree. That's where I kind of like a trusted source that just tells you what to do. So Jeff Galloway would
The
just
apps give the plan.
Yeah, exactly. So the easiest option, although I'm more of a fan of Jeff Galloway, how deep down the rabbit hole do you want to go? If you don't want to go that deep, just get the Couch 5K app. You can literally choose who talks to you, and it tells you when to run, when to walk. And the goal over a 9-week period is that by the end of 9 weeks, you're going to be able to run a 5K. But week 1 is very easy. And all it does over a period of 9 weeks is shift the ratio from walking to running.
Does it matter what your start point is, how overweight you are? They still reckon you can do it in 9 weeks?
No, that's a good point. All you do if you're struggling is repeat weeks. And so I say to my patients that depending on what their starting point is, this might take you 6 months to finish the 9 weeks, and that's completely fine. Really important point about running is the hardest part of being unfit in terms of wanting to be a runner. The hardest part is going from 0 to being able to run a 5K consistently. Once you can run a 5K consistently, and this is counterintuitive, and my patients don't believe me when I say this until they go through it themselves, it's so much easier to go from being able to run a 5K to being able to run a marathon than it is to go from not being able to run at all to running a 5K. So what I do with my patients who are in a state of poor health, being overweight, and they want to be a runner, I say this might take you 1 year to go from not being able to run at all to being able to consistently run a 5K 3 times a week. Our goal is to get you to run 5K 3 times a week injury-free. That's the really important bit. Can you run 5K 3 times a week injury-free? And to go from being overweight to being able to do that might take you 1 year. If you do that, though, consistent, and you have a consistent year, and someone might be helping you along the way, and you're doing a few accessory things like a bit of strength training alongside it, to go from running 3 5Ks a week injury-free to running a marathon would take you 4 months. So you could be that person who's really overweight one Christmas, takes a year to, in quote, just run a 5K, but you've built amazing foundations in your fitness, in your aerobic fitness, your tissue resilience, your plantar fascia, your Achilles, your knees, your hips, your tendons. And then you take that body the next Christmas and go, do you know what? I've signed up to the London Marathon in April now, and in 4 months' time, I'm going to run a marathon. You could do that. What most people do wrong, because there are stories of incredible transformations where people go, oh my God, I've just got into the ballot for the London Marathon and I'm really unfit and overweight, and I've got into the ballot and in 6 months' time I'm running a marathon. It is possible to do that. The risk of injury doing that is very high. The risk of running the marathon and absolutely hating it is very high. Whereas if you're the person that I think is much more sensible, where you take 1 year to get to the point where you can run 5K consistently, and then go to whatever you want to do, half marathon, marathon, but you're building that on a very well thought out foundation. That then means when you run that marathon, you won't get injured. Your risk of injury would be way lower. Your risk of enjoying it would be way higher, and that's what I get people to do. So really, if you're that person that you mentioned, overweight, unfit, doesn't know where to start, get the Couch to 5K app.
It's called the
Couch to 5K.
Couch to 5K, and you got the Jeff Galloway app as well.
So I don't know if Jeff Galloway has an app. What I'd do is just do a little bit of research looking up Jeff Galloway. Okay. He goes into a little bit more depth about it and has slightly different plans. But the thing about it all is you just need to start. And I think the Couch 5K app is probably the easiest way to start, where you don't have to think. By the time you're at that point where you can run 5K, and even if it's taken you 3 months or 6 months or 12 months to do the 9-week program, because you keep repeating weeks, by the time you're at that point, you'll start to ask new questions. You will just be a different human being, and you'll be asking new questions. And that's where I would recommend asking questions like, okay, what's an optimal plan? Because the Couch to 5K plan is only about getting you to run a 5K. Once you can do that, you then need to start asking, how do I build an ongoing plan? What on earth is Zone 2? How do I measure that? How do I run it? And all those things. You'll ask new questions. At the beginning, you really don't need to be worrying about that. That is a slightly more intermediate question. But if you are more intermediate, if you can run 5K and beyond, you should be asking those questions. How do I build a plan that is sustainable for the long term, builds my aerobic base, allows me to have wonderful big adventures and fun races, and importantly, doesn't injure me along the way. And that's where we start talking about Zone 2 running, speed work, strength training, all that stuff.
Okay, let's simplify it further.
Yeah.
I am someone who's overweight. I don't want to go to the gym. I don't want to do anything else. I do want to try running. I want to run. I only want to run to reduce my body fat. That's what I want to do. What would you suggest the best format for that is in a long-term plan?
The unfortunate answer is exercise, including running, is a long second place behind your nutrition. I'm probably making these numbers up, but it's going to be 80% of your journey is nutrition based and what you put in your body. And then exercise and also sleep is really important. So what they've found about sleep is if we're chronically if we don't sleep enough, what that does is it makes us crave more carbohydrates, and we'll just subconsciously want to pick on more ultra processed foods the next day after poor sleep. And if you're doing that constantly, it just makes the journey so much harder. So
let's come round to that. Let's come back to sleep and nutrition. Totally on board.
Sure.
For this example, I'm on top of my nutrition. I'm eating what I think is healthily, I'm eating what I think is healthily, and I'm on top of my sleep. I want to do something more to burn fat.
Right. Okay.
I 100% want to come to nutrition and sleep. Definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely.
I don't think you need to have a weight loss as the primary focus. You just need to build a good plan that you can stick to consistently. And one of the most common things that gets in the way of consistency is injury. So nothing about what I've just said changes in the context of weight loss. If you run consistently, you will lose weight. You then therefore need to focus on how can I be consistent. So you need to run in a way that doesn't injure you. That comes down to sensible programming. Some people like to do it with friends so that holds them accountable. They have external accountability and they have the social side that might make it more fun for them. I'm a bit of a loner. I just love being on my own when I'm running. I've tried joining 2 running clubs, and after a while I'm like, do you know what? I just like running on my own. I like to race with other people and I like to run on my own. I love the headspace that brings. You need to figure out what joy you find in running and then try to optimize that and be consistent. Even without this running example where the person wants to run, I have many patients who are maybe overweight, and losing weight would help them in many ways. And the reason they're seeing me was because of pain. So I'm often framing the conversation around their pain. But what I say is weight loss isn't the goal. Really building a healthy life is the goal. And a byproduct of that is weight loss. So for this example of the overweight person who wants to use running for weight loss, that's fine. What I would say is just find the joy in running and then do it in a way that doesn't harm you and therefore you can be consistent with, and you will lose weight. There is no difference to running for weight loss as there is for running long term because you just bloody love it.
One of the things I miss about running is that you mentioned the headspace there, is the headspace. Now, when I left the military, and I was running after it, I became someone I would run with headphones in. I would listen to something. Normally I'd be listening to a podcast or an audiobook, or sometimes I'd be listening to music. And there was at some point, and I don't know when it was, but I'm pretty sure it was early in the pandemic or just before. And I made a conscious decision to run without anything. Now, that may just have come about because one day I couldn't bring my phone or couldn't find my headphones or whatever, and I went out for a run without it and then found benefits of running without. But the reason I stuck with that is because I almost got into I almost found like meditative benefits from running without. I would literally go on a 3 mile, 4 mile run and find answers or come to resolutions in my mind about problems or things in my life, or professional or personal, where I'd sort of been wrangling with, should I do this or that, or what do I think about this or that? And I would call them light bulb moments regularly on runs, regularly, in a different way than I do if I go to the gym. I don't wear headphones doing anything now. If I go to the gym, there's something about running. And I think it's because what you're doing is just second nature. You're just moving left in front of right, left in front of right. It is basic. You can do it with your eyes closed. Literally, don't even have to think about it. I think that you're doing that. You're in out in the open, whether you're in a city or whether you're in a town, whether you're in a village or in a rural area, whatever. I was running on a canal at that time, normally. It allows your brain to totally switch off from what your body's doing and switch on to all of the information and experiences and thoughts and wranglings that you've had recently, and address them, analyze them. Not like a formal conscious thing. You go, right, I'm going to think about what is it? Your brain has no option but to randomly think of things. It doesn't have to think about running because it knows what to do. It doesn't have to think about anything at all.
Yeah.
My brain would go on to these avenues. The reason I reference meditation is because it sort of does the same thing there, depending on what type of meditation you're doing. And it had that big an impact on me. I thought, I don't want to not have these light bulb moments. I solve so many things, or I come up with so many great ideas, little things that I don't want to not have that. So I ran without headphones. And these were easy runs. Again, a lot of the reason I was asking about the formatting and the things and planning your training sessions, stuff. I've never thought to that depth. I've been just someone who goes, I'm going to go out and do a gentle run, or literally I'm either going out and do a steady state run, or I'm going out to do a PP. That's it. I'm going to do as fucking fast as I can. I'm going out steady. They're the two formats I had, apart from a change in distances. But why did I come onto that? The headspace side to the running. It's so beneficial. It
really is. I love weightlifting as well, and I do find mental health benefits to that. But it's different. There is a difference with running, and it's hard to put into words what the difference is. I just say running organizes the chaos in my mind. Like, all of the little pieces of the puzzle are still there, but they're just more organized. And I personally only get that from running. So yeah, I think, do you think you're going to try and get back into it gradually?
Possibly. I'm at a place at the minute. I'm really happy with I'm training. Now, my training is, I try and the two things I like to perform well at. I try and improve my performance that I'll perform well at: rugby and boxing. Okay. Now, boxing, that is when I say performance boxing wise, I mean fitness perspective. I don't competitively box. Rugby, I competitively play rugby. I try and perform better at that. And the way I'm training at the moment, I don't see any issue with it for those two sports. So predominantly what I do at the moment is, and you notice the white thing on my finger, I've not been able to box or play rugby since early December, which is really frustrating, really frustrating. But what I've done is change the way, I've had to change the way I train. And interestingly, it's changed the way I think about injuries.
Mm-hmm.
And I started doing that last year. I'd be someone who, partly because of bad habits, I'd be drinking as well. It just changes the way you think about things. I would be someone who, if I got injured, I wouldn't do anything.
Yeah.
If it was, if I got badly injured, not badly, but it was like back or legs, like normally something that would write you off from doing most things, I wouldn't do anything at all. Okay, if I can't do the thing I like, I ain't doing anything.
Mm-hmm.
I think about it differently now. And an example of that is, so early December, dislocated my finger playing rugby. I can't believe how debilitating it is and how long it's taken to fix. I can't box, I can't play rugby at the moment. So I forced myself onto a different training regime to focus on the things I'm really weak at.
Mm-hmm.
And so my training now is, when I go to the gym, at minimal, I would call it like a 45-minute warm-up. It's not a warm-up, it's a workout, but it's not the level of fitness now. I'm calling it a warm-up. I'll do 5 or 10 minutes skipping.
Mm-hmm.
I'll stop every few minutes and do stretching, and they're stretches specifically designed, provided by physios to overcome the like chronic knee issues, disease actually that I've had for years that I'm trying to overcome. And so I'll do my skipping just to get my body warm, and then I'll do 30 minutes of shadow boxing. And that shadow boxing is a 2-minute shadow box, high intensity, 2-minute shadow box, 1 minute break, 1 minute rest. The 1 minute rest, I'm stretching.
Mm-hmm.
I'm doing all these stretches I have to incorporate. I'll do that for 30 minutes. I am pissing sweat. I start sweating immediately with things anyway. Like I'm an excessive sweater, really quick. If I go in the sauna, I'm visibly sweating immediately. It's dripping on the floor. No one else in there's dripping. You can see if people are dripping. It's just one of those things. I straight away sweat. I would say, oh yeah, that's high metabolism. It's just the way I am, and probably is the case. Maybe there's other reasons, but I'm not bothered by it. So that's at minimum, that's what I will do in the gym. Most of the time, I'll do that 45 minute session, dripping with sweat. And then I'll go into the weights or into the gym, because I'll do all that in the studio. Then I'll go into where all the weights and all the machines are, and I will do calisthenic stuff. I'll do press-ups, pull-ups, sit-ups, press-ups, pull-ups, sit-ups, and dips. Do those things as bog standard to keep that up. And then I'll go and do some weights. The weights won't be like a traditional weight session like I used to do, like an hour and a half, targeting specific muscle groups. I'll target specific muscle groups. I'll do a lot less of the exercises. If I'm doing chest, for example, because I've just banged out a lot, I've just been, shadow boxing, and I've been doing press-ups and dips and that. My weights would be probably the bench, some dumbbell presses, some dumbbell flies, maybe get on the machines and do some crossover. Can't remember what you call them. And then, probably 2 exercises. And then I won't go into the details of how many sets and reps I'm doing, because there's no point. And then I'll do some tricep stuff, and then I'll finish. And then I'll get in the sauna for 20 minutes.
Yeah.
That's what I do now. And I've been doing that since early December. And I've noticed some massive changes. I say massive changes, noticeable change, and then I hadn't realized what happened. My fat content has dropped. I'm burning fat. My body weight hasn't dropped. Maybe I was by about a quarter of a kilo. Maybe by about half a kilo, maybe. If that. Yeah. Probably a pound or 2 on average. It's really hard. When you're that level, it's hard to understand. Is that what I've lost, or am I just measuring myself at a different time of day? Exactly. I had food. I had a massive shit this morning. I'm not hydrated, whatever. I try and weigh myself always in the mornings. But anyway, so I've lost fat content, body fat, sorry, by about 1%, which is quite significant. It's visibly noticeable. Like literally the difference between, so I was about 15.6, 15.7 on average before, and now I'm down to just over 14%. But the visible difference is mental. Like I can see a 6-pack.
Yeah.
Not ripped, crazy gym man 6-pack. I can see a 6-pack. When I was at 15% that wasn't there. It wasn't like beer belly, but it wasn't there. I'm just really surprised by it. So I'm noticing those results really good. However, I would like to hear your thoughts on that regime. I like this regime.
Yeah,
I'd
yeah.
like to keep it going.
Yeah.
It'll get less. I'll do it 3 or 4 times a week, right? Sometimes more. It'll get less when I can start training rugby and boxing again, because those things will mean I've got less time for doing
Sure.
that standard.
Yeah, yeah.
What are your thoughts in general on that regime?
The first thing I want to say is the best thing you've done is train through injury. And this is what I always say to all of my patients. There are very few exceptions to this. And the exceptions would be brand new, very acute, very severe injury where things are completely in spasm. You might need to cut things out completely for a few days.
I've got a challenging question for you in a bit then.
Yeah. But as soon as possible, which is surprisingly soon, you can get back to training, with the huge caveat that you really need to modify what you're doing. So I am not saying train and push through pain at all costs, but I am saying find a way to do something that your body can do even while you're injured, and you're doing that. So that's kind of tick number 1. Tick number 2, it sounds a great routine. I'm going to give you an example of a good friend of mine. He's a high-level CrossFitter. And do you know much about CrossFit? I mean, Paul Goodonis has done quite a bit.
Apart from, I'm not a fan of them.
Okay.
But they are less dislikable than High Rock people. I'm joking. No. CrossFit. I've got a lot of time for what CrossFit has done for people getting
Sure.
into fitness.
Totally.
Yes.
And exactly. I used to do a lot of CrossFit. I don't do it anymore because the modality, the principles behind it don't make a huge amount of sense. And one of the things that doesn't make sense to me is how much intensity they do. So I've got this good friend. He's a very good CrossFitter. And I've been saying to him for a long time, the thing that CrossFit is missing is slow, easy running. And the reason it's missing, although if you ask these people, does aerobic base training make sense? If they know their physiology, they would say absolutely it makes sense. The problem is CrossFit gyms are businesses, and they can't charge people 100 quid a month and go, right, guys, we're just going to go and do a really slow and easy 50-minute run, and you won't be sweaty. It'll be nice and easy. And then we'll get back in 50 minutes and you'll go home. It just wouldn't work for their business model, even though it is actually optimal for their athletes. And I've been saying this to my friend. I'm like, look, you're doing all your weightlifting, you're doing all your Metcons, your high intensity stuff, you're getting really out of breath, you're doing all your hot and sweaty fun stuff. But what you're not doing is the slow and easy zone 2 stuff. And he's got kids the same age as me. So we've been running once a week while our kids are doing sport. We go off and do a zone 2 run, just an hour. And it didn't really take much time at all. Within a month, he was saying, Chris, my CrossFit workouts are so much better. My Metcons are so much better. And that goes back to what I was saying about the engine and the turbo. With just one run a week in zone 2, even though if you were being a runner, if you wanted to be a long distance runner, I'd say the 80-20 rule is good here. You'd want to do way more slow running. He doesn't care about being a runner. He doesn't want to run long distance. He wants to be a good CrossFitter. And still, that one zone 2 run a week has had a measurable impact on his workouts within not much time at all. Within 4 to 6 weeks, he's noticing it. So I would say for you, like, I totally get it. Like, not everyone wants to be a long distance runner, and that's completely fine. And if your primary goals are boxing and rugby, I still cannot see how the physiology of that engine and turbo doesn't make sense to do some targeted training at your aerobic base. The other thing about it, if you have time in your week, is you can double up. So I'll often do an easy zone 2 run up to about an hour, and then another time in the day do my strength training or a Metcon, a high intensity thing on the same day, just with a bit of rest and food in between. The easy zone 2 runs, by definition, are easy. So you can do double workouts in a day if you have time.
That's a good point, right? Because that is a really good point. Because the last thing I want to do is introduce another form of fitness and get really into it on top of the other stuff. Like, the last thing I want to, I don't need to increase the amount of time spending on physical activity at the minute. And as mentioned, I think on the Icebreaker, like many people, my life is fucking hectic. It's hard work to carve time out. I do it, but I don't really want to carve more time out. But what I would want to open up the floor for myself is to do alternative types of phys. So right now, if I'm short of time, I normally walk to the gym. It's not about an hour. It's 1.2 miles to the gym. I'll normally walk there and walk back. That's extra time. I can drive there. I really don't want to drive there. I can cycle there. Prefer not to do that. But if I can't do that, because I'm going to go there to the gym, I'm going to go do something significant. I'm going somewhere that's got all these resources. Otherwise, no point in going there. At the minute, if I don't have the time to do that, and I've only got maybe 40 minutes, 45 minutes max, then I will go up to the rugby pitches. I'll walk to the rugby pitches not far away. I will get some sprints in. That could only be 15 or 20 minutes of sprints, because by the time I've warmed, I've stretched off, I've walked there, I've stretched off, and do the sprints. Anyway, that's what I'll do to plug a gap. Now, I would not be against replacing that or adding another option, which could be a short run. But I only really want to do it if I think I'm going to get benefit from it.
Right.
You know, it was interesting what we were talking about earlier, and that the benefits to the back, to the spine.
Yeah.
I'd never realised that before. And all these other sort of indirect benefits you think in parts of the body where you're going, that's got nothing to do with running. Like the ligament in your neck. What ligaments are you talking about?
Nuchal ligaments.
The
nuchal.
nuchal.
N-U-C-H-A-L. And it's just a sheet of ligament that just goes there. It's kind of a thick fascia, actually.
N-U-T-H-A-L.
N-U-C-H.
C-H, nuchal. Okay.
A-L.
No, I would not be against introducing running again. And also, if there's a way that could assist me in my recovery of my knees, my knee injuries. One of the things I have, Chris, on a regular basis, right, and this is since I've stopped running, I probably was happening when I was running, is I'll get up in the mornings and my feet are sore. It's not the soles of my feet, it is skeletal.
Okay.
Both feet sore. It's not for long. It goes away pretty quick when I go to bed. We're talking within a minute it's gone. But it's sore to the point like, oh God, I tread carefully. And it's skeletal in both feet. It's not an ache. It's not sharp. But it's enough to me to go, I should not be experiencing that pain. I don't think I should. Does anyone else have sore feet in the bones when they get out of bed? Is that something regular? Like I said, I'm not doing a lot of running. I'm not doing a lot of that stuff.
A few questions. So
I need a quick answer.
Yeah,
like something really easy. Come on, eat more. Have more minerals.
Many things are worse just first thing in the morning. That tends to be a sign that they're inflamed, and then there are many reasons why that might be. So it could be a musculoskeletal problem. So it's quite common for things like plantar fasciitis to be worse after rest. So plantar fasciitis is we've got this thick fascia underneath the foot, which we call the plantar fascia. When that's inflamed, that's a plantar fasciitis. And it's common to be most sore after sitting, after rest, when you first get up in the morning. And at first, that's counterintuitive. People think it would be more painful when they've been walking around for a while. But actually, what walking does is it squishes the inflammation away. And it's when we've been resting and off weight bearing that the inflammation can build up. So when we first put our feet down, it can be painful. So that's an example of something that would actually feel quite deep in your feet and could feel skeletal, even though it's actually the fascia, and would be worse first thing in the morning. And then when you get up and move around, it flushes it through. With morning pain, I mean, this tends to be things that last, the discomfort tends to last a bit longer, but there is a category of problem known as rheumatological problems, which is where systemically your joints might be more inflamed for certain reasons. And that can just be sore first thing in the morning. That tends to last an hour or 2 hours. So the fact that it's so quick probably suggests it's musculoskeletal. But yeah, without doing a proper assessment, that's as far as I can get with it. A proper assessment would give you a specific diagnosis and then give you the plan. But I mean, one thing, do you ever walk in those barefoot shoes? Do you do much barefoot stuff?
Yeah. I've moved to, because of, why have I done it? I've got bunions in the family.
Right.
And I'm dealing with problems at the minute. That's why my challenging questions will come on to you in a bit. But so to answer your question, yes. I wear thin soles as much as I can.
Mm-hmm.
As much as I can. When I go to the gym, when I'm doing for example, my shadow boxing, I will rotate between doing that in normal gym shoes, so it's like normal, just a pair of running trainers, basically. But they're not soleless, they're just running trainers. I'll either those, or I will do it without anything on my feet. For a couple of reasons, because when boxing shoes, boxing boots, they're really thin soles. So because when I'm shadow boxing, I'm training my body to technique correctly, from moving my feet, moving position, to the way I'm punching, to the way I'm blocking. And so I'll go barefoot to one, to strengthen up the skin of my feet, because it's just not great because I'm wearing shoes and trainers all the time. But two, to replicate having boxing boots. I don't want to bring my boxing boots to the fucking gym. I'm not doing that. I'm only one of those people. And so I wear thin soles as much as I can.
Yeah,
to answer your question.
No, that's good.
To answer your question,
Yeah, often if we have weakness that in muscles, that can be a reason for pain. And one of the best things for the muscles underneath the feet is to do as much as you can barefoot or in these thin-soled shoes. So the fact that you're doing that, that's really positive. Yeah, without going through a full assessment, that's as far as we can get.
No, I know. So yeah, okay. Here's a challenge for you.
Sure.
So on the subject, so it's possible that I may have to have an operation on my left foot. Right now, or maybe offered an operation on my left foot. Now, if I have the operation on my left foot, this is what I've been told. I will be so for 8 or 9 weeks afterwards. My foot's going to have to remain in an elevated position for as much of the day as possible. I'm basically going to be housebound.
Right.
Foot elevated as much as possible. And to reduce any chance of inflammation there, reduce inflammation there basically, and try and keep heart rate low to try and with that recovery, because there'll basically be a wound which will need healing up, and it'll be a scully the operation on the bone. So I've got 8 to 9 weeks of that.
Yep.
Right. After that, for up to the 9-month point, I can't do anything impact wise on that foot. I will be able to swim.
Sure.
Right. So again, the reframing of injury to my mind, I'm not thinking, oh my God, I can't do anything I want to do in that 6 to 7 months afterwards. I'm thinking, I'm going to be getting great at swimming.
Yeah.
It totally changed it. However, those 8 or 9 weeks where I cannot do anything, I can't drive, for example, I can't do anything. There's literally, I can't do it. What the hell can I do fitness wise? Apart from sit there with some dumbbells and just lift dumbbells and get massive biceps.
Yeah.
You know?
What have they said about static bikes?
About what, sorry?
The static bike, just being on a bike. Can you?
I don't think it's really possible. I think because my legs will be below my body. And again, blood going to the foot.
Yeah, I would really just pressure them on what I say to my patients. I try and coach them through the conversation they need to have with their surgeon. So just say to your surgeon in the pre-op conversation, I'm a really active person. This is what I'm worried about. I think I can cope with more activity than your average patient, which is 100% true. Like the average person that's going in probably for the same operation wouldn't have the background of fitness that you've got. So just frame it in a way with the consultant. I'm an active person. I'm worried about not being active. I also think I can cope with more than the average person. What really do you want me to do with those parameters? Because what they've probably said is you want your foot up as much as possible, but that doesn't mean the whole time. And also what they're doing is they're getting you to do that to help reduce inflammation. But one of the other really good things, from my understanding of trying to reduce inflammation, is actually moving and
circulation.
Actually, yeah, and getting your heart rate up a little bit. And so then I'm just starting to think about what ways could you do that safely? And there might be, say, a 2-week window where you really need to do nothing, but I'd be surprised if it's much more than that. So yeah, where my brain goes, you can do lots of weird floor exercises. And
the thing is on that is like, I'd like to go into that conversation with someone like you. Yeah, I mean, this is not me recruiting you, but because of something you mentioned earlier, like these, I don't think these people are really experts in the recovery aspect. They're probably experts in what kind of impact it's going to have on the body. But in terms of recovery and practical side of literally practically recovering from it, apart from just reading the notes and what the surgery advice says for this thing to tell the patient.
Yeah, the problem is it's very protocol based, particularly in the NHS, but even private in the UK. We've done this, so you need to do this for week 1 to 3.
This is private.
And that's what I'm saying. So these, when you get to surgery level, it's still quite protocol based. Like this is the sheet, this is the thing you need to follow. It doesn't really matter what your background is or what your fitness is, and there are definitely times where we need to follow that protocol that is there for a reason. But then there are times where a fit, strong person with a good background of fitness can bend the rules a bit. And that's where I just go case by case. This is the joy of being an osteopath, where I can see someone face to face for a certain amount of time, like 30, 45 minutes, and I can see them week on week. And in the same way with your weight training, for example, in order to get better at the bench press, if you can bench press 100 kilograms, you're not going to get stronger bench pressing 10 kilograms. But you're also not going to get stronger benching 120. That's going to squash you. You need to be, if you're a 100K bench presser, you're going to be bench pressing around that 80, 90, 95 mark and building different volumes around those numbers to incrementally improve your bench press. And this is exactly the same with rehab of any injury or operation. You need to find out where you are now and incrementally increase it very carefully and safely. And that's the joy of working the way I work, is I can see someone in front of me and I can test them with movement assessment and go, okay, they're good at this, not so good at this. What's the gap? Where do they want to be? What's this person's goals? And this is one of the problems, particularly in the NHS. Like they'll sign you off from for example, a hip operation when you can walk up the stairs. And well, do you want to just walk up the stairs, or do you want to play golf, or did you used to play tennis, or what's your personal goals? And we need to get you back to that. And I get to do that with people. I get to say, this is where you're at. This is what you're good at. This is what you're not good at. This is where you want to go, and what's the gap? How do we do that incrementally and carefully? And I would say, with your background, sitting around for 9 weeks just isn't an option. You'll be much better than that. And so then you and I'm not saying disregard what the consultants say. It's hard to put into words here. There are absolutely some things we need to follow, but on an individual case, you may find that you can do certain things a lot quicker, in a way that not only can you do them, but in another, it would also benefit you it would actually accelerate your recovery. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, that's a good point. And in your experience, are there any areas in your profession that you think other people in your profession get wrong in terms of advice to patients or people they're trying to improve in terms of performance, for whatever reason, with that recovery from injury, or that because someone wants to increase their performance capability, or that people who are receiving advice from people like you misinterpret?
I think if people are keeping up with the research, there's been a big shift. I've been practicing 17 years. In that time, there's been a big shift towards more strength-based rehabilitation. When I started my career, it was much more about stretches and do this stretch. We want you to be more flexible. And actually, the research doesn't really back that up anymore. So there's been more of a shift towards building strength and resilience through a range of motion rather than flexibility into a range of motion. And if people are keeping up with the research, when I say people, if the medical practitioner is keeping up with that research, then we're all on the same page with that. It's not really debated anymore. But then you do get people who just aren't keeping up with that. So you might get, and this is, again, maybe coming down more from the consultants, where they're doing their thing, which is they're very good at, but then maybe not keeping up with the new research around movement and rehab and how quickly people can get back to things, not just because it's safe to, but because it actually enhances their recovery. So, and typically I see if someone gets weird advice that contradicts the modern research, I'll ask the patient, how old was that consultant? Because sometimes people are if they're quite a bit older, they're really good at what they do, but then maybe not keeping up with the latest research as much as a younger doctor. So that seems to be the correlation I notice. It still happens. Thankfully, though, this really doesn't happen very often. The research is so clear on what we now need to be doing. I'm an osteopath, but if you look at the sort of exercises osteopaths give compared to, say, physios, it's basically the same. Like, the research is pushing us all in the same direction. Now, if you're an evidence-based practitioner, you're going to land somewhere pretty similar. And like say, even from most consultants, they're totally on board with that. It's not debated anymore, unless you're not keeping up with the research and you're 20 years behind. So it doesn't happen too often, thankfully.
Going back to sleep and nutrition.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So can we jump on nutrition a minute?
Yeah.
So what are the principles, the fundamentals of in inverted commas, good nutrition. I can't do that thing. Of good nutrition that you think people should be living by right now? Do you think?
There's so much online
It's
about
fucking
nutrition.
crazy.
And this is an example of someone who just doesn't know where to start. And they're
Yeah.
like, oh, I don't know what to do. And I think of it like a pyramid where it's quite a wide-based pyramid. So the base of the pyramid is the most important thing. That's the thing you really need to be focusing on. The thing you need to be focusing on the most is cutting out ultra-processed foods, meaning you should be focusing on cooking fresh as much as possible. So have you turned a whole food, something with one ingredient? What's the ingredient? Broccoli. It's broccoli. So broccoli has one ingredient. And have you turned a whole food into something? That's the most important thing you can do. So if
above anything to do with, for example, not putting words in your mouth, for example, carbohydrates, sugars, grains, anything like that. Above all, whole food. You start with the whole food.
yeah.
Okay.
And so then when you're talking about,
Why?
I think it's because humans haven't yet figured out a way to be smarter than nature. That's probably the most simple explanation for it. Nature, we have evolved over millions upon millions of years to be entwined with nature. And if we take the things that nature's given us and turn them into something, that's good for us. Why is that good for us? It's really complicated. Not to the point where I'm like saying, oh, you can't understand it. I'm saying, I can't understand it. I don't think science can understand it yet. It's just so complicated. When humans come along and go, we're a bit smarter, or we can make it more convenient for you by wrapping it up and having a microwave pizza with 50 ingredients, something has happened with that human intervention that's made it worse. And there are lots of things, but the simple summary is it's not as good as nature. So just take that extra little bit of time to take a whole food, turn it into something. That's probably the most fundamental thing you can do to improve your health. The next most fundamental thing is make sure you're eating the right amount. And the two are intertwined. If you're eating whole foods, it's actually quite hard to eat too much. When you're eating good food, it fills you up. You feel satiated. It is possible to overeat, but it's much harder. There's an interesting thing about obesity that they've found that it comes down to eating highly calorific and highly palatable foods in combination. So if I give you an example, steak is highly calorific, but it's not highly palatable. Palatability is different to how tasty something is. So you might really enjoy steak, but if something's highly palatable, you can just keep on eating it. So steak is highly...
Moorish. It's
yeah,
moorish.
so steak is highly calorific, but it's not highly palatable. Once you've eaten a certain amount of steak, you're like, I cannot eat anymore. But if you take something like a frozen pizza or a pack of Pringles, it's highly calorific and highly palatable. And that's the bad formula that leads to obesity. So going into this kind of pyramid idea of like, what's the most important thing for nutrition? I just think try and cut out ultra processed foods. And the other way of saying that is try to do as much whole food cooking as you can. And then make sure you're eating the right amount. But if you're eating whole foods, that's going to make that easier. And then beyond that, you can get really nerdy. And I have gone really nerdy in my life. I've been strict paleo, I've been strict keto, I've been strict vegan, all for certain long periods of time. And I like to experiment on myself and do these things as experiments. When I do an experiment, I go all in. So when I say strict, I've been super strict on all of those things. And after a certain period of time, I'm like, I feel all right, but I don't feel better than when I was just kind of eating a bit of everything and cooking fresh. So I just kind of, what I end up landing personally on is I don't want the pressure of having to be strict anything. I just want to cook whole foods and enjoy my food. And if people have ethical, particularly, I mean, veganism has that ethical side of things rolled into it, which I would say is debatable. There are definitely some truths in it, but do people need to be completely strict vegan to get all of those ethical benefits? That's the bit that I think is debatable. But if we take that aside and we're just looking from health, I just think whole food.
Yeah.
There are caveats. If someone needs to fix something, so if someone has a gut issue, if they have an autoimmune condition, if they have intolerances, all of these things need to have a specific and individual plan built for them. But the average person that doesn't have to fix those things, I think could could really improve their health with what I was just saying.
I think anyone who thinks they've got issues or think need to change their diet, you just need to be really careful with. This is my own opinion here. You need to be really careful with going on to these. I would call them. What's the word? The diet of the day, like
The fads.
things like but I think major things as well, like veganism, for example. You need to be really careful with doing that as your first choice to move on to something else. And the reason I say that from I deliberately did a lot of research on this kind of stuff, reading on these things, to try and educate myself on it, and good or bad or not. And I'm inclined to think they're not great for most people. There are some exceptions, not many. Now, I've landed myself on a diet which is sustainable. I really like it. I find it very easy, and I don't stick to it strictly. I don't give myself impossible goalposts, right? So, but generally, I've landed myself on a diet which is almost entirely meat and dairy and greens. I do not cook carbohydrates for myself unless it's in a green veg or meat naturally in there, right, which is unusual. And I try and stay away from sugar. I try and stay away from sugar, and I try and stay away from carbohydrates. I minimize these things. I don't eliminate them from. I'm not someone who's going to go into a restaurant and go, or someone's going to cook me a dinner and go, sorry, I don't eat mashed potato. I'm not having a dessert. I will on occasion have those things. More regularly than I'd like, but most of the time I'm just eating meat, dairy, and greens. Where dairy is concerned, I prefer to have raw milk. It's a pain in the ass to get it where I live, and same for all the meat and all the just good sources of. But most of the time I get myself from the supermarket. But what I found was the first thing I ended up doing was cutting out sugar, completely eliminating it, almost completely eliminating it. A dessert didn't become normal. Eating sweet things just got removed. That really changed who I ate, because all of a sudden and minimizing the carbs, all of a sudden my afternoon slump of energy, and a slump like after a Sunday roast or whatever, afternoon slump of energy and my varying levels of tiredness throughout the day, which was just normal before. I don't have that. It stopped almost immediately, and the way hunger presented itself to me was different. I'm not someone who gets cravings anymore. I don't wake up in the morning starving. I can go. And it also brought in intermittent fasting, which was totally unintentional. That's what I do now. It's totally just the way it is. I'm someone who can go to. I can go all day without eating. I shouldn't. I can literally get to 5 or 6 o'clock and go, fucking hell, I haven't eaten. But I realize I haven't, just because not because I'm craving food. Right? No, that's not a good habit to do. But so I mentioned that point. My energy levels, I don't get tired. As in, I don't get tired. As in, I need sugar or I need caffeine to keep me going. I have a constant energy level throughout the day, whether I've been to the gym or not. My energy level is constant throughout the day. I'm just existing. I don't feel tired. I don't feel overly energetic. I'm just normal. Get to an evening, I feel like I can sleep, and I go to sleep. That is almost entirely because of sugar and minimizing the carbohydrates, I think. But it's really, for me, it's really easy to achieve. The only one problem I have with it, I think, is, and it's something that's come to the front of my attention really, because what I'm thinking about really with the last few weeks, is that I think maybe I'm under eating, because it's really easy in this diet. I wouldn't even call it a diet. I'm just eating decent food and I'm minimizing the shit. Carbohydrates, not great for you. They're just not great for you. Sugar is terrible for you. Literally the devil. Processed foods, the devil, real bad. But it becomes really easy to undereat and forget to eat decent meals. And I think when I'm training the way I'm training, I'm doing a lot of training.
Yeah.
I think I need other calories on board. Now, have I noticed anything physically to indicate I'm not eating enough? No. But I think just by the math, I'm going, I'm not eating enough here. And maybe that's impacting my progress. Not that I've got progress to any specific goal. I want to get stronger. I want to get fitter, cardiovascular and aerobic and anaerobic. And I could definitely want to put on a little bit more muscle mass. definitely not happening as quick as I would like, but then I'm not monitoring that close. I'm not really that bothered by it. So I wonder what are the short-term effects? Am I pushing myself towards some form of injury or illness?
I was going to say underfueling is a big cause of injury, and it doesn't happen straight away. So it would be over a period of months, and then you'll just get this random niggle that doesn't get better as quickly as you're expecting, and then might pick up something else, and people are like, oh, what's going on in my biomechanics? And then we realize, oh, they're just not fueling enough. It's really important to fuel your training. So worth thinking about. I always think I don't do this consistently, but if you're ever questioning anything, it's always worth spending 2 boring weeks tracking everything on MyFitnessPal or an app like that. It's really tedious and I don't do it consistently. But if I ever need to make a change or I'm questioning something, I do every single meal.
MyFitnessPal.
Yeah, it's called MyFitnessPal, and track everything, every single meal, drink, and the app's got very clever over time. You can scan barcodes and it knows all of the ingredients. But you can get really nerdy on it. Just weigh everything. If you're cooking from Whole Foods, weigh what you're putting into your meal so that you know literally how much broccoli have I just had, and put that into MyFitnessPal for 2 weeks. And you'll just start to get a sense of seeing the objective numbers. This is how many calories, this is how many protein, this grams of protein, this is how many grams of carbs, whatever. And then you might realize, oh, yeah, I really am underfueled. This is what I thought I was getting every day, but actually I'm 400 calories out consistently. And that becomes a problem over time. So it was probably worth if you're questioning it, do that boring 2 weeks. See where you're at. Don't change anything. That's the other thing in the first 2 weeks. Don't change anything. Just do what you're currently doing. See what it is objectively on the app, and then you'll realize, oh, I need to make these adjustments.
One of probably the most positive thing I've had from this, I'm going to say this the way it's got to be 3 years now. I've been like this 3 years. The most positive thing is that almost debilitating hunger that used to be common. If I didn't, I was someone who I get out in the morning. If I hadn't eaten breakfast by 10 o'clock, my energy, I'd literally be worried about myself, passing out kind of thing. Jesus Christ, I've got to eat something else. I'm going to die. And I haven't had that. Well, I tell a lie. I've just come back. So I was talking to my missus about this yesterday. I've just come back from a trip away for a few days, and for some reason, I was staying at a hotel. It was a work trip, and I ate breakfast every morning. And this morning, so I got back yesterday, and this morning, man, I'm hungry for breakfast. I'm like hungry for it. And my diet out there wasn't that great, and it's reminded me of, God, I feel hungry. I haven't felt like this for ages. It's almost like it's a controlling thing over me that I don't want. I don't want this kind of hunger that means I have to eat now. I don't want that. I like the luxury of eating whenever I need to eat, as opposed to eating whenever my body actually needs to eat, as opposed to when my stomach says it thinks you need to eat. But sorry, going back, I was talking about veganism and these different diets. And if you're someone who's, my advice on it is, if you are someone who wants to change the way you eat, not sure how to do it, and maybe it's all the whole package. You want to do more exercise, you want to improve your nutrition, you want to always do different things. My first advice on the nutrition side, the easiest advice from my perspective, easiest advice to implement from the nutrition side is eliminate or drastically reduce the sugars and carbohydrates you're taking on board. Because it's really easy to do, right?
My
really
first
easy.
advice is...
You may disagree.
No, I can 100% agree.
Okay.
But my first advice is even one step behind that, which is cut out snacks. And I have...
That's a difficult one. Or replace snacks with the healthy ones.
Yeah. As long as... Okay, that's...
Because I think you can't cut out snacks until you... It's hard to cut out snacks, right? Until you're cutting out the sugar. Because the sugar creates the hunger that you want to snack in between the main meals, I think.
Interesting. Yeah.
Interesting means you don't agree.
No.
Interesting. You're talking shit.
No. I'm just wondering. I'm genuinely wondering, what is the thing for that person to focus on? Is it cut out sugar? Because actually, that for me feels like quite a hard thing to focus on. Whereas if they go, okay, well, I've just had breakfast and I'm not allowed to eat until lunch. That's a very binary. Okay, no matter how hungry I get in that mid-interim, it's binary. I'm not eating till lunch. And when they get to lunch, I'm not eating till dinner. And they're not allowed to snack after that either. The reason I say it that way around is by cutting out snacks, they're also going to be just significantly reducing their calories. So depending on how someone snacks, they might be cutting out 600 calories to 1,000 calories out their day, which is, for an overweight person, that's significant. And it's the binary nature of the decision that I quite like about that focus. And I also have lots of people that I chat to where they know their weight is an issue, and I know their weight is an issue. We're talking about it, and I tell them we've had the conversation around whole foods, and they'll say, "Oh yeah, I kind of cook really well." I'm like, but there's still a problem. and the problem in most of these people's cases is their actual meal is kind of okay, but it's all the other stuff. So by focusing on all the other stuff, just saying very binary, yes or no, you can't have that other stuff, but you can still have the meals you cook. So you don't have to change anything about how you prepare your meals. Your breakfast, lunch, and dinner can be the same. We just cut out the snacks. That can be really significant for people.
Yeah.
I appreciate it. For some people, it might be harder. And that's what I'm trying to figure out.
The thing is with the carbs and the sugar, right? Because of the way it interacts with your blood sugar levels, the insulin, all that does, the spikes and the crashes, and the crashes, is that it means that literally food and needing to eat is constantly in your forefront of your mind, constantly, which is what leads to the snacking. So when you take those things out, all of a sudden your body isn't crying out. It isn't saying we need sugar, we need glucose, we need to get this thing in the body. It's not doing it. So you're not constantly thinking about eating.
I completely agree. I guess the other part of my reason for that, my focus on cutting out snacks, is the probability of there being more ultra processed and higher carb
in snacks.
There's a high probability of all of that being in the snacks. And I'm still thinking of these people who go, I kind of cook okay. I do cook a bit, and even if you take like a ready meal spaghetti bolognese, although that's really not as good as a home cooked spaghetti bolognese, it's still way better than, I'm trying to think of a snack, just like a chocolate bar in the mid morning. So they're probably not getting quite as many sugary carbs in even a ready meal compared to the snack that followed it. So that's where I just put their focus.
The biggest myth for me that people it was sort of well, it still is in most people's minds. Like absolutely, it's the rule is that carbohydrates are a necessity, which is absolute fucking nonsense. When you're talking about potatoes and pasta and the kind of carbs you get from those kind of foods, it's absolute fucking nonsense. You can exist without it, and they contribute to those spikes. I mean, a chocolate bar mid morning, you're really doing yourself over. What you're doing is you're making it hard for yourself to eat healthy. You're making it really. I love a chocolate bar. Like I love a chocolate bar too many times a week. I love it. It's like my vice, but it will mess me out. It's the same way if I have a carb heavy meal of an evening, if I have a cheat night and have a pizza, I go out for a meal somewhere that's potato heavy or whatever, I am starving the next morning. And I know it's entirely down to overloading those things, but the nutrition question, it's totally overcomplicated to people, I think, and deliberately so, and it's a big industry in a lot of areas, and just you can simplify it for yourselves, like you were saying, reduce the shit foods, the foods that we know are shit, sugar heavy, and the amount you're consuming.
There is since I've been more into long distance running, I've actually found my body wanting a few more carbohydrates. So,
yes, different and extreme, in extremis, so right? Yeah.
This is goes back to that pyramid idea. So the base of the pyramid for everybody, it comes down to cutting out ultra processed terrible foods, switching them for more whole foods, making sure you're eating the right amount. They're the fundamental things that you can't argue that everyone should be focusing on. Beyond that, though, if you want to get into the nitty gritty, that's where we can start to talk about macro ratios and micronutrients and the style of food you're going to eat. Are you trying to fix things? Are you trying to improve your gut lining? All of that stuff comes as a higher level conversation. So, but I actually also like to just teach people to listen to their body, and your body does have a language. Listen to your body's language, the signs and symptoms that your body is trying to communicate to you with. And just through kind of a natural process of the foods that I've migrated to since doing more long distance running, I have gone to higher carbs, not high carb, but higher carb than what I was doing on paleo and keto. And I think that is because I'm just using more carbohydrates in my running. And there are some people who do long distance running on keto and they talk about their being fueled by fat, but they're really a minority. And I often think, look at what the best people are doing And then we just have to take our own little sample of that. And the best runners all around the world are fueling themselves with carbs. The best cyclists are fueling themselves with carbs. We need carbs as endurance athletes.
Endurance, yeah, okay, yeah. All right, yeah, I'll accept that.
Yeah.
All right, we've got a load of questions
Cool.
from the patrons. Mind if we dig into these?
Go for it.
Okay. So, how has running impacted your mental health? Do ultra runners have better mental health on average compared to the average person? Great question.
That's a great question. The second part of it, I honestly can't answer. Do ultra runners have better mental health? I don't know. I think we're all on our own journey with it. Ultra runners are definitely using the test of these big challenges as something that gives us mental resilience. There is a feeling of, if I can do that, I can kind of cope with anything. And ultra marathons are a very condensed version of life. So in a day, you go through lots of ups, lots of downs, and that's all condensed into one day. And it teaches you a lot about your mind. And then that carries over into day-to-day life. So I'd say it's that ultra running certainly improves our own individual mental well-being. Can we say that that's better than the average population? Who knows? I have no idea. And then what does it do for my own health, mental well-being? It just calms the chaos in my mind. Not only the racing and the races is what gives me that mental resilience that carries over into day-to-day life, but just the training consistently running does calm the chaos of the mind. And that I need it in my life for my mental well-being, I would say.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Who are the best ultra runners in your view, and what makes them great? And is David Goggins one of them?
The best ultra runners, I would say Kilian Jornet on the male side and Courtney Dauwalter on the female side. However, there are different categories of ultras. So what they both are fantastic at, and I don't think anyone could argue they're the greatest of all time, they're great at the kind of 100-mile distance in mountainous terrain. When you go beyond that, Jasmine Paris this year, is she on your radar?
Nope.
Oh, okay. Have you heard of the Barkley Marathons?
The what?
The Barkley Marathons? No. Right, there's this...
my knowledge of ultramarathon starts and stops with Courtney Dauwalter and now you.
No, that's okay. No, it's fine. I'll fill you in. So there's a race called the Barkley Marathons, and it's, if you measure it by the percentage of people that have actually finished this race, it's the hardest race in the world. Lots of races claim to be the hardest race in the world, but this has about a 96% failure rate.
Jesus.
And in its 25-year history, only about 4 or 5% of people have actually finished it. And what it is a 5-loop track in Tennessee, and it's created by this absolute crazy guy called Lazarus Lake. And no one knows exactly how long it is because no one's allowed to use a GPS. They're not allowed their watch. They're not allowed their watch. They have to prove that they've been round the course by finding a book at certain checkpoints and pulling out the page that correlates with their race number. He starts the race with a cigarette. Anyway, it's a very, very hard race. And to prove how hard it is, I always say one of the pinnacles of ultra running is UTMB, Ultra Trail de Mont Blanc. There's about 105 miles in the Alps. It's got about 10,000 meters of elevation gain. It's a savage race. The winners of that race are doing it in under 20 hours. The winners of Barkley Marathons are doing it in 59 hours. So you've got the world's best ultra runners running about the same distance, because we think the Barkley Marathons is just over 100 miles. And if you take the UTMB distance, which people are doing in under 20 hours, the winners are doing it almost 3 times slower because of how hard the terrain is, how much elevation there is, the weather conditions. Anyway, this is a really long story. Jasmine Paris this year became the first lady to ever finish all 5 loops. It was a monumental achievement that's literally given me goosebumps thinking about it. People were on the 4th loop with her, and they got back and they were saying, Jasmine's never going to finish this. 6 hours out, because there's a cutoff time of 60 hours. 6 hours out, she'd been running for 54 hours. She realized she's not going to finish this either. She's gone too slow. So she just went, right, fuck it, I'm going to sprint. And she just started sprinting. And then she really thought she was going to pass out. She couldn't sprint anymore. She thought, fuck it, I'm going to run faster. And for 6 hours, she was redlining. She finished the race. She got it under in 90. She beat the cutoff by 90 seconds. She was collapsed. I've got a photo on my wall by a photographer called David Miller, who captured her under the finish line, which is a gate. It's a metal gate. She's collapsed in a heap under this gate. She just can't talk to anyone. She's been in a trance for 6 hours. She can't actually talk either because she lost her voice during that 6 hours. She was so gassed out for 6 whole hours at the end of 54 hours of effort. Now, Courtney Dauwalter's tried to do that race in admittedly worse weather conditions, but she didn't finish it. I think she only did 2 laps. And it was worse weather conditions that year. But there's another level of suffering, even beyond what people like Kilian and Courtney do, where you're going into those very, very tough 60-hour type races. And Jasmine Paris has to be in that conversation. She's just an incredible, incredible athlete. Like, I met Jasmine Paris recently, watching.
Where's she from?
Lakes, the Lake District, I think.
Oh, she's British.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it was just an incredible achievement. She's a vet. She still works as a vet, and she's doing this part-time. It's just nuts. And I met her recently, and watching the footage of her finish the Barkley Marathons made me cry. Like, not just cry, but I was sobbing watching this lady put that much effort in. And I said to her recently, I was like, Jasmine, I did not know humans could push themselves as hard as you pushed yourself. Like, I just didn't know that level of like self-inflicted suffering was possible. And she was like, yeah, I didn't know either. And she was like, yeah, I didn't know that was possible until I did it. And she just had this ability to go to that level. So yeah, I could talk all day about Jasmine Paris. She's amazing.
Right. You're gonna get it. We're gonna try and get her in the studio. That's what we're gonna do.
Oh my God.
That's
yeah.
what we're gonna do. 100%. 100%. What do you dislike about the ultra running community?
It's a very welcoming, generally very cool community. Is there anything I dislike? There's got to be something mean I can say about them. It's such a welcoming community. And the other thing about an actual ultramarathon is the only way you're going to get to the finish line is by managing your intensity. So you can run at that, what we call conversational pace. So you're just running, you're chatting to people, you're literally having a lovely conversation on the way around with all these wonderful strangers. It's really welcoming. There's a little bit of rivalry with companies like UTMB. UTMB is now been bought out by the Ironman brand. Huh. And it's a huge corporate now, Ironman, UTMB. And there's a little bit of like, some people really don't like UTMB. Where I land with it is I've done UTMB races. I've done the UTS, Ultra Trail Snowdonia. I loved it. I think they really put on a good show with their money. They just have this huge production that really puts on a good show. Some people are quite anti that because UTMB are buying races that have been owned by individuals and then they're just making them really big. And I just think we should be doing both. I think we should be doing the small local races, supporting our local community. And if you want to splash out from time to time, do an expensive race, accept that it's expensive, but they do put on a good show. That's fine. There's a little bit of rivalry in the community. I don't buy into it. I can't really say anything bad about it. I'm afraid. I know there should be some controversial thing I should say, but
no, that's cool. So, where is it? What person would you recommend Hugh invites onto H Hour?
I mean, if you can get Jasmine Paris, she would be
amazing.
This
is what you mean if I can get? This is going to have to be a joint effort. I don't know her. You've met her.
I met her at the Running Expo, and I was probably one of thousands of people who came gushing up to her.
Her profile must be massive now, is it?
She's super low profile. Only recently she opened an Instagram account. I mean, already she's got tens of thousands of followers, I think, but she just didn't want to do social. She didn't want to have sponsors. In fact, I think she's even still ditched her sponsors. She just wants to run and do her thing. So she's pretty low profile. And yeah, when I say I met her, I did talk to her face to face in a short one-on-one conversation, but that was just me gushing over her at the Running Expo. I'll
reach out to her.
Yeah, it would be pretty cool to talk to her. Her mental resilience is up there with top people in the entire world.
What about anyone else? Anyone nearer to this area? Well, I'll have a think afterwards.
Yeah.
Because this subject fascinates me. Performance, and the impact on people mentally.
Mm-hmm.
The importance of physical exercise. I think
I know who you should talk to. On this, was this your comment in the icebreaker or the High Rocks Brigade? I know someone who is a world record holder in High Rocks, but as an over 50 lady.
And I know where this person lives. I know where she trains. I know exactly who you're talking about.
Okay.
This is near to us, right?
Yeah. So Sam Bilby. Is that who you were thinking of? I can put you in touch with her. She would be in Chelmsford.
I don't want to say where she trains on her.
Okay.
She trains in Chelmsford, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm sure I've met her.
Okay.
I train in there with someone else. I was training with Paul. Anyway, we're talking about stuff people have got no idea what we're on about.
She would be good to talk to.
Blonde hair.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've met her.
She'd be good to talk to because
okay.
Maybe her love of High Rocks would rub off on you. Maybe. But she's really inspiring because of what she's doing. Bilby. And what she's doing over 50, her fitness is incredible. And she's definitely proof that we shouldn't have excuses as we grow older. She can
over 50?
What do you mean?
Years old?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm thinking of someone else.
Okay.
Okay, yeah. Okay, cool. No, I didn't. That's just someone else I'm talking about then.
Right. Okay.
Interesting.
Yeah, her level of fitness, her level of dedication, and what she's pushed through is really inspiring. She's not in the ultra running world, but in the fitness space, as someone who has a different angle, she'd be worth talking to.
Okay, yeah, we'll talk about that after. Yeah, definitely. How has ultra running impacted you mentally?
I've gained lots of lessons from it, and I've condensed some of these lessons into little pithy phrases, and it's amazing how often these phrases present themselves in my day-to-day life, in work and with the kids. And I think this is the thing. I feel a bit silly saying this to an ex-military person who's been through actual real physical trauma, but even just normal boring life is hard. And it's hard for everybody. And we can gain a lot of lessons when we really condense and really take that intensity up in our training and in our competing. And that's the thing that I would say has helped me the most. That doing something like an ultramarathon is incredibly hard, but it's only a day or 2 days, depending on how you do it. And then the lessons you learn, though, are so clear and so sharp because it's so hard. And then when you're in just the normal day-to-day life that is also hard, less intense, but also hard, you get these little reminders of what happened to you in the ultra. Like, oh yeah, that thing that I remember happening, I can apply that now. And I just need to keep on going, keep on trudging through. And that's how I would say it's carried over.
Yeah, definitely.
Day-to-day life.
I agree. I think it's one of the reasons that physical exercise is so positive an impact on anyone who does it, right? Regardless of how often you do it, what kind of exercise you do, anyone who does it, whether you're doing it for the first time tomorrow after listening to this excellent chat, thank you, Chris, or someone does it regularly, and the importance of it and the impactfulness of it is one of the major reasons is because you are, by choice, putting yourself out of your comfort zone. You are, by choice, putting yourself through a little bit of pain or a lot of pain, right? Now, whether you're going out to do a steady run or whether you're going out to do a hard run or whatever exercise you're going to do, if it's a steady one, there are going to be points where you don't want to do it. There's going to be points where it's going to be a little bit uncomfortable. You were choosing to do that. What you were doing is you are proving to yourself that you can take a level of hardship and be okay with it, and also you are choosing to put yourself through it because you know it's going to have a positive impact. That entirely plays out in the real world. Okay. I mentioned, I think it was on the icebreaker, or maybe it was at the start of the actual podcast, about the impact that the sauna has on me. It's like a litmus test to me I use it as a benchmark of how capable I am of dealing with stress, right? But I also use it as a tool to manage stress better. Apart from the physical activity I'm doing anyway, the gym and running, sprints and rugby and boxing, all that. Well, I can do those fucking things. When I go into the sauna, I'm literally going in there and I know it's going to be painful. There is no sauna I've ever been for 20 minutes where it's comfortable. Zero. It's always uncomfortable. It's always uncomfortable. I'm choosing to do that. And when I complete that 20 minutes, or, last year, even when I was only doing 10 or 15 minutes, I've still gone in there with the intent to put myself out of my comfort zone, deal with hardship, overcome it. And you may be thinking, oh, it's only the fucking sauna. Go in the sauna and do 20 minutes. No one finds it comfortable. I don't care who you are. No one finds it comfortable, right? What that does to me is it strengthens my mind. I am more resilient because of it. My mind is more resilient in dealing with pain, in dealing with hardship, in dealing with unexpected incidents like injury, like, emotional things that go on, personal or professional life things that go on impact me emotionally. I'm more resilient to deal with those things, so they have less impact on me emotionally, so I can deal with them better, so I don't crumble. So I don't. I don't. Yeah, I've a meltdown at something happening unnecessary. That the main reason I do my physical activity is because of the mental benefits I have from it.
100. And I think most people say that as well. Anyone who trains consistently, that is the first thing they say. That is why they do it. They might have their particular goals around their particular thing, their weightlifting or their running or their boxing, or they'll have a particular goal. But really, when you ask them what's the main benefit, it's their mental well-being. They just feel better day to day.
Yeah. I had a day 2 weeks ago. There was a day 2 weeks ago, and I thought, oh my God, I haven't felt like this for at least a year and a half, maybe. At least a year. And it was just a nightmare day. My brain was all over the place. I couldn't focus on anything. I was feeling super stressed. I was feeling hideous anxiety, real bad anxiety. And I wasn't coping well with things that day. The world wasn't falling around me. There were some really minor things, work things that went on. But I thought, my God, I can't. Why am I handling this so badly? Why does this seem to be a major problem in my mind when it isn't a major problem? Why can't I focus on anything? Why is my brain all over the place? And I realized late that afternoon that it was obvious that day was going to come. That kind of day was coming. It should have been obvious, because in the 2 week build up to that, things had been, my routine was totally out of kilter. I'd hardly done any fitness. I had a lot of stressors going on in my life, which a lot of people do, right? Anyway, I had a lot of things going on in my life which were just unusual, made things a little bit harder for me. A bunch of different stuff, personal and professional. And because of all of these things combined, I hadn't done a lot of physical exercise. I hadn't done hardly anywhere near what I'd done, maybe once or twice in the week before, and in that week, maybe once, and what I had done was really minimal. And the culmination of that was me having a nightmare day. A nightmare day where the slightest little thing just sent my brain out of the world didn't collapse around me. I didn't have a meltdown. There was no intervention needed, but I had a miserable day, real bad. I mean, I thought, and it made me think, I haven't had this for ages. Why am I having it? Fuck. Why. That's why. Because I let these things over the last 2 weeks get away from me, run away from me. And what I should have done, what I will do in future is be more conscious of these things. Like I know, for example, this last week, because of work stuff, I've been traveling a lot. I know that the physical activity has dropped off because I just haven't been able to do it as much. Partly that, and partly because I haven't been very disciplined with myself. And I don't want what happened 2 weeks ago to happen next week. So literally the next few days is focused on bang, bang, bang. I'm going to do 3 days of backup, high intensity, my training session I'm going to do. I'm going to do the next 3 days because one, the actual physiological benefits are there, but two, also the psychological benefit of my head thinking, you're back in the game, mate. You're back in the game. That's it. You had 4, 5, 6 lazy days, but you're back on top of it now.
Mhm.
And then if I have any issues next week, there's unexpected dramas, I'm not going to have the day I had 2 weeks ago. I don't want that again. It was horrific.
Yeah.
It's horrific when you can't focus on one task for more than 10 seconds.
I call this the physiology of happiness. And when you look at a lot of the
physiology of happiness.
yeah, and often when we think of happiness, and even books about happiness, it's about the psychology of happiness. But our physiology, the things that have been influenced by the things we've eaten, the time we went to bed, the amount of exercise we've done, that is probably, I think, the strongest precursor for how happy we are able to be, and then also how able we are to cope with problems. And I treat a few people who are chronically depressed. Now, depression is a very complicated thing. Like, true depression is a complicated thing, and there are lots of variables. But when I then look at these people, and I appreciate this is a really complicated catch-22 they're stuck in. They're depressed. They don't have any motivation to train, and they're also picking on convenience foods, and that's making them more depressed. And because they're more depressed, they have even less motivation to train and even more desire to pick on sugary, convenient foods. So they're stuck in this loop of what I call the physiology of happiness. They've got poor physiology that is getting in the way of their happiness. Then there are all the other complicated things that contribute to depression that are influencing them as well. So I just try and get people to try and break that cycle somewhere. So when you've got a background of health and fitness, it's still hard. That's the thing. It's still hard. But we all just have to try and make those little changes in the direction of health. So in the same way earlier, I was saying that the overweight person shouldn't really focus on losing weight. If they just build the healthy lifestyle, losing weight will be a byproduct. I also think the depressed person shouldn't focus on not being depressed. If they could just focus on cutting out a little bit of that sugar and maybe doing a small, teeny tiny little workout once a week, that's a little win in the book. And then next week they could try and do it 2 times a week. And if we focus on the health, then the other things happen as a byproduct. And that physiology side of things really impacts our mental well-being.
You know, it's one of the major things we did mention earlier when we were talking about sugars and carb and diet and stuff, is that the actual psychological impact it has on you and your ability to be a high-performing in thinking. They have a major impact. But I mean, we'll close it off in a minute. But High Rocks and CrossFit. One of the best things about those 2 things, and anything else, Ironman as well, I think, anything like that, right, is that the community aspect. This is so important, and I'm not a fan of I'm not a fan of either, right, for various reasons. But it reminded me. The reason it popped in my head now is because we mentioned on the Paul Gadonis introduced us. Now, Paul and I and a guy called Ash Fletcher, who I work with Ash, and Ash is a good friend, and we went and did a weight training session together. Right, we don't ever train together. We all do entirely different types of training. Ash is a High Rocks guy. Paul's a flipping meathead, just eats dumbbells kind of guy. Not a meathead. You're not a meathead, Paul. And I explained what I do. We train entirely differently, but we went to Danbury Fitness. We went in Chelmsford. We went there for Paul trains. Go there and do a weight training session. Okay. And we always struggled with each other to make our diaries match together, all 3, and try and get a brew in. We will make that's the first time we spent time together, the 3 of us, for a few years. We're not all best mates, but we're very, very close. I'd say very, very close friends. And at the very least, close friends, right? And at the end of that session, that gym, I came out. I remember it was actually the next morning, and I thought, I'm not aching a lot, I'm not aching a lot at all, actually. And for a weight session, we were in there for like an hour and a half. My muscles should be screaming after that, and they're not. I thought, I'm not bothered, because it was the 3 of us in there. We spent probably 60% of the time, 70% of the time chatting, right? The other time we were lifting weights.
Yeah.
But it was such a positive experience. I got to spend time with 2 guys, a huge amount of respect for them. They're amazing guys. We did a little bit of training, but it was about that community aspect. And That is the great thing about Hypox. It's a great thing about CrossFit. Is that that additional benefit for people who maybe struggle with the motivation to go and keep fit. They maybe struggle if they didn't have those communities. Maybe don't have an opportunity to socialize very much in their lives, and they go there.
Well, it also comes down to personality types and things. My wife is a keen CrossFitter, and she's much more extroverted than me. She really thrives with her friends. She loves chatting, and I'm a bit more of an introvert. Well, much more of I'm end of the spectrum introvert. I'm a real nerd. I like to make my own programs and geek out about trying to optimize towards my certain goals in my strength and in my running. I like to go and do my own thing. If I was programmed something in a CrossFit class that conflicted with what my goals are, I'd be like, why am I doing this? I want to go do my own thing. My wife doesn't care about that. She just wants to be a CrossFitter and be with her friends. So my advice to anyone is just find what you enjoy. Like, I enjoy running a long way. That's not for everyone, and I totally get that. Just find what you enjoy, find what you can stick to consistently over a long period of time, because it's sticking to exercise consistently over a long period of time that is the magic.
Yeah.
Anything else will fail. You just have to find what you enjoy and stick to it for a long period of time. And that could literally be anything that gets you out of breath a few times a week, builds a little bit of strength, keeps you mobile, and allows you to have fun, whatever that means to you.
Yeah. No, that's great advice. That's great advice. You've got a awesome YouTube channel.
Oh, cool. Thanks.
Can we point people to it?
Yeah. If you search Chris Branch on YouTube, you'll find me.
Yeah.
And
loads of, we've barely scratched the surface of Chris's knowledge here on this episode today. So if you want more of Chris and his mind, then go to that YouTube channel. Actually, I'll put it in the description of the YouTube video here as well.
Yeah.
And where else can people follow what you're doing and contact you if they want to?
Instagram's the only other place, but I'm not particularly active on Instagram. But you can find me by putting at Chris_Branch_. That's my Instagram handle.
At Chris_Branch_. Okay,
yeah. Yeah. But all of the links and even my email address are on my YouTube channel.
Okay. All right, cool. Been a real pleasure, Chris.
Yeah, I've enjoyed this chat.
Yeah. Good shout to Paul for introducing us. And good luck with everything. I'll see you in Chelmsford. Maybe train. You may see me in Chelmsford running around, maybe.
That would
possibly
be good. That would put a smile on my face. That would be good.
Good luck with everything.
Cheers, Hugh.